Apparently, we're live. Apparently, the big red button in the side says that we're live, so we must be live. So, as a lot of people may or may not have read the title of this little debate conversation thing, I, a Brit bonger, a limey, a dirty, dirty limey, is going to be talking to two Americans about the Second Amendment, and both of them. Well, I don't want to give their positions away, but I think people that know who they are would know that they're pro Second Amendment. So you got two pro Second Amendment people talking to a dirty limey talking about the Second Amendment. So that's basically the premise of what this is going to be. But I would like to add a little caveat. So for the Americans that are watching, I'm not your common average bear. I mean, common Brit bonger. I do understand why the Second Amendment is there. I do not want to strip it away. I do not want to come for your guns. I'm quite happy.
He's not Piers Morgan.
Yes, I'm not Piers Morgan. I'm not coming for your guns. I do not want to take them away.
He's lying to us all. I'm joking.
Wait, are we talking about Trump or Morgan now? But yeah, basically, I just want to have a conversation about, is there a way of feasibly having a talk about gun control, or is it just too much and we should just stick to the Second Amendment? Is there no way of having any sort of adult conversation about gun control without people on the left trying to say we're going to take all your guns away, and people on the right saying, well, that's what you're going to do, so we don't want to have the conversation? So I just wanted to see what your guys' takes on it is first, and then we'll try and move forward from there.
Okay. Then I'll go ahead and start. I'm sorry, Darkano, for talking.
Go ahead.
But
I still need to get myself a little bit more warmed up first.
The thing that people have to understand, especially British have to understand, is what the Constitution does. Okay? The Constitution delineates, does not sit up there and give rights. It delineates what the governments can't do. When I say governments, I'm referring to the federal government and even the state governments, because it outlines, okay, what they can do and what they can't do. Right? Now, when it came to the Bill of Rights, right, which are the first 10 amendments to the Constitution, most of the first ones were those rights that apply to individuals and cannot be superseded by any of the governments.
Sure.
All right. And of course, the Second Amendment is included in that. First Amendment as well.
Sure.
All right. People talk about these are negative rights, for example. So when you start talking about the Second Amendment, okay, what the governments can do and what the government should be allowed to do. Well, it's already spelled out for you. You're not allowed to do anything about gun ownership, period. Now, they've ignored that, in my opinion. All right. The bans, for example, on machine guns, all right, is being ignored. Okay. They're ignoring the Constitution in that regard. That was a bad Supreme Court decision. And within our society, within American society, all right, it is the SCOTUS that, when you end up in a quote unquote what they consider a gray area, is the defining aspect of what the Constitution actually is. All right. This is how it's always worked. The problem with any decision, of course, made by a court, is the fact that it's made by men, and 20 years from now, different men, different women who are on the court, all right, could make different decisions. Okay, so it's not stone. Okay, does that make sense?
Well, the thing that I would say to that is it not a case of it not being a case of set in stone? It's the case of the Supreme Court is there to interpret the Constitution, because it can sometimes be a little bit
it could be
grainy.
That's what they're supposed to do, but unfortunately, that's not what they've done. All right. And this is not the only example of it. There's plenty of other examples where the Supreme Court has gone out of its way to actually try and reinterpret the Constitution rather than, or redefine legislation from the bench. Right? It's happened throughout our history to an extent. Okay, it's not something that's new. Although lately it has become more obvious. Lately, it's increased. The amount of times that it's been done has increased dramatically. But with regards to the Second Amendment, I think the Second Amendment is pretty clear, right? That the states, that the government, any government, does not have the right, all right, to define gun ownership or weapon ownership, if you really want to look at it from that perspective.
Right. And I guess was you going to say more to that, Nomad?
What I was going to say more to that? No, I'm waiting for you. Go ahead.
Okay, yeah, I guess this will be the moment of where that I'll start to chime in and give some of my opening thoughts. Obviously, I do not have a scripted opening statement or anything like that. I've been on hiatus for a little while and still yet on more hiatus yet to come. But since Common Sense Guy was so nice to ask and invite me to come on here, I thought, I'll make an exception to it, and maybe I'll make a few exceptions when it comes to joining other people's live streams. So yeah, I'm the Dark Conservatarian. If you want to check out my YouTube channel, go ahead. But it is kind of somewhat on ice, including my secondary channel, Dark Hunt Entertainment. But anyway, about gun rights, I agree pretty much with everything that Nomad just said there about how that the Constitution is not the document that technically gives us rights. It's a document that's meant to affirm and preserve our rights as much as a document can by having its politicians swear to uphold it and whatnot, and also having all these different branches of government that have their own self-interest in mind, and so are kind of somewhat motivated to be countering each other and whatnot. I mean, it's a whole lot more complicated than that. The reason why I say that is because anarchists like to nitpick at the Constitution sometimes, but nonetheless, yes, I agree pretty much with everything that Nomad just said about the Constitution and gun rights. I would say that the only way that I'd be willing to really that I think one could ethically say is compromisable from a libertarian standpoint when it comes to guns is punishing specifically violent felons, and no one more than that. And even if somebody was just a one-time murderer, and 20 years on down the line they have not committed they have not hurt a single fly after that, maybe there should be consideration to give them back their gun rights, et cetera, et cetera. But anything from traffic misdemeanors or drug dealing or anything else, victimless, air quotes, crimes like that, I don't think is grounds for taking away people's gun rights. And more importantly, I don't think especially if you committed no crime at all, should be grounds to say that we should restrict your gun rights. AKA, you cannot own a full auto weapon in the ways the Hughes Amendment has, as I think that Nomad has also tried to infer a little bit earlier. You cannot own this type of semi-auto rifle. You cannot own a handgun until you're 21, but funnily enough, at 18, you can own a hunting rifle, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah, that's my point on it. And I guess another point of conversation that I will give credence to the left on, and as a point of criticism towards the right, my own side on, is that we don't really talk enough about mental health. I guess maybe that's more of an open topic of conversation. I mean, the government taxes us already as it is, so while it's taxing us, why not use those tax dollars in the best way possible? And that one of those best ways possible, applicable to this subject right now, I think would be to do something that does not impede on innocent people's rights, that is, to maybe help out somewhat with the mental health crisis. But even then, I'd be somewhat picky on what exactly we do as far as mental health goes. Like, for example, I don't want to restrict people's gun rights away from them just because they have PTSD or anything else like that. As there was one study, I would have to go back and look what it was. It was one that Mr. Dapperton has cited multiple times throughout his time on YouTube, of where that people who are mentally ill are actually more likely to be the victims of gun violence and not the perpetrators of it, et cetera, et cetera. But yeah, I guess that's where I'll end off my statement off.
See, I completely not respect both of what you've just said. I'm not in this conversation to try and take away negative rights. I'm not trying to be into this conversation to try and push any sort of an agenda or anything else like that. I'm not trying to be a Democrat or a socialist or whatever. I'm trying to find out if there's any sort of give in the idea of with the idea of a regulated militia. Where does that regulation of a militia come from, and where does it end? So I just want to try and put that back to you. If the Second Amendment is a case of a militia needs to be regulated, what do you think that means to you guys?
It doesn't. You're misreading things.
I'll
Right.
bring it up if you want, MC. Nomad, I'll bring it up.
It doesn't say that the military or that the militia needs to be regulated.
It does. It says it needs to be a well-regulated militia. It literally says that. I'll quote it by
because a well-regulated militia is necessary.
It says, and I quote verbatim, a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed.
Right.
So a well-regulated militia is the first part of that reading. I do not disagree with any of the other parts of the Second Amendment.
Okay, but listen to what it's saying there. It's saying a well-regulated militia is necessary. It's given a reason. All right, their stated reason for having individual weapons rights.
And I don't disagree. You're missing my point.
It's not sitting up there giving them giving the government, all right, the leeway to regulate the militia or not regulate a militia. Okay.
If I may sort of step in a moment here, Nomad. I mean, what is your angle on bringing up that point, if I may ask, Common Sense Guy? Is it a point bringing up the whole regulated militia talking point that people like TYT have brought up before, and the other actual gun control advocates beforehand have brought up? Sure. Is it to try and make the point that it somewhat negates people's individual gun rights, or what is your point of bringing it up?
The point why I am bringing it up is that it states that it's a regulated militia, which means that it's not just a free range on what's going on and around, which is why Colombia versus Heller had a certain ruling saying that you're okay to use it for defensive or military purposes, but not okay to have it for just walking around or running around, so to speak. So what I'm pointing out is the fact that with a amendment that says it's a well-regulated militia, I'm not trying to say, well because of that means that you shouldn't have this.
It didn't say that though. That's an interpretation that you're making that doesn't stand. All right, when you examine the wording doesn't say, all right, that it's a well-regulated militia that you're supposed to be a part of. What it's saying is that a well-regulated militia is necessary. And what it's referring to when it talks about militia, all right, is it's referring to the fact that it's not governmental controlled necessarily, or at least federally governmentally controlled.
So in Colombia versus Heller, the decision of the Second Amendment definitely covers certain aspects of defense and military defense, and thus banning certain types of classes of weapons that are used commonly. I've got the full quotation. I can bring it up for you.
I realize that, and I also reject the argument there. Okay, this is what I was talking about when I talked about the Supreme Court overstepping its bounds and trying to legislate from the bench. This was an example of it.
I don't see where it's trying to legislate. Like even from this,
it rewrote the Constitution. You said, okay, here's what the Constitution actually says. We are now going to say, well, it doesn't really say that. It doesn't say that it's an individual right. See, we're gonna sit up there and play the game of, well, the well-regulated militia is a governmental institution.
No,
that's not what. No, it's exactly what they said when they said that.
They
says that they can have the option of being able to do this. They can say they're saying that this only applies, right?
Excuse me. Oh wait, Nomad. What?
That's the individual.
Nomad, what ruling was it where the SCOTUS judges said that?
He's saying Colombia versus Heller.
Colombia versus Heller is a ruling of where that the judges said that said what again? The regulated militia is what now?
Are you asking me or Nomad?
I'm asking Nomad.
It's basically they were saying that they have the right to control which weapons you have and which weapons you don't have, because we're creating the definition of saying this only applies to those weapons that are applicable to the military. All right. And
okay, I was wanting to ask because I kind of want to Google it up myself.
Right.
Keep talking.
So the issue then becomes, okay, was this a good decision by the Supreme Court? This is a flawed decision by the Supreme Court. All right. That's what it is. All right. You if you take a look at the Supreme Court and say, okay, the Supreme Court is, yes, we understand that we have to abide by the rules of the Supreme Court. That doesn't mean we have to agree with them. Okay. And this is one area, all right, that I don't agree with them on. All right. I do not agree with this decision in any way, shape, or form, because they didn't need to make it this way. And there's a lot of reasons why I'm putting this out there. Their conditions of saying, okay, well, these machine guns are causing all sorts of problems, and we need to be able to limit this. Okay. Now, you can limit. You're fully within your rights, and the states are fully within their rights, all right, to limit, okay, where guns are. You can't bring a gun in this area. You can't bring a gun in that area. The problem, though, becomes if you try to put that too broadly. Because if you say, well, you can't have any gun outside of your home, okay, or you can't have any gun outside of a safe.
But that's not what this ruling ever said.
No, I understand that. So,
but that's what we're talking about.
Well, okay, but this ruling here basically stated that the government gets to pick and choose of which government or which weapons are applicable to, all right, are going to be defined, and which ones aren't.
Yes, by common use of defense. By common use of defense, yes.
The say of common use of defense is funny if you sit up there and ban something that could be commonly used for defense, but no longer is available to you. To say that it's a standard when a new weapon system or a new product comes online, that's all now limited as a result of this. This is a bad decision. It's a far more reaching decision than people realize.
So the main ruling was, because it was a case of Colombia trying to ban handguns, for instance, which was what the ruling was about. They decided and ruled correctly, especially in my opinion, that they could not ban the use of handheld guns because it was a case of it was literally the most common use of protection for people. So they cannot ban that because it would breach the Second Amendment. Are you saying you disagree with that?
I'm saying that banning the weapon, all right. I'm saying the whole concept of banning the weapon was a bad decision. All right. By giving the government leeway, while you look at it as saying, well, they made the right decision that people should be able to defend themselves. That was never the argument, supposedly, though, right? The argument was hey, does the government have the right to restrict weapon ownership? Is what the full argument should have been. Instead, the Supreme Court waffled in between. They sit up there and made a decision that says, okay, we're going to say that this is common, so therefore it's all right. Well, okay, that's all well and good, but what about a new weapon system coming down the line?
But where the whole case, the Colombia versus Heller case, was because Colombia wanted to ban handheld guns, as in handguns.
Right.
But that's the case can only deal with what's put in front of them, which is why the Supreme Court ruled.
But the reasoning,
okay,
but the reasoning used by the court, the majority reasoning used by the court was inadequate. All right, and it allows for the Hyde Amendment and the other amendments to go forward. You
do realize that a dissent is not part of the ruling; it's added to the ruling. It's not actually a part of the ruling, right? So when you're talking about Justice Stevens' dissent, it's not part of the. Okay.
Let me give an example of something. Right, what I'm referring to, the Supreme Court. All right, let's go back to the ruling on the Missouri Compromise. All right, the Dred Scott decision. Okay, the Dred Scott decision. Many people don't understand the Dred Scott decision for what it is. The Dred Scott decision basically came back and said that a state does not have the ability to determine citizenship outside of its state. Okay. Now, if they'd have just said that, that would have been fine. But the ruling went further. The ruling went further to the point of saying, and because of this, all right, and the fact that the federal government hasn't defined anything, therefore, no black person in America or no African American in America, all right, has any legal standing. They are still should be considered slaves. Most people don't even read that far into the decision, but that decision was applied retroactively, and it came to the point. All right, it really became a sticking point because at that point, every African American that lived in the United States could be captured and taken back down south and enslaved, even if their family, even if they were no longer slaves and they had evidence that they were never slaves or that their family hadn't been slaves.
Okay, so I've read the whole ruling. I did not see any part of that ruling whatsoever in that aspect, and I have the full ruling, including the introduction, the ruling, and the conclusion, and the amendment to it, as well as the dissenting opinions of it. So, where would you quote that for where it's from, please?
You're talking about the Dred Scott decision?
No.
All right. I'm talking about it from the very fact that when you say, because this is used in this manner, we are giving the right. Well, what it's not doing is it's not saying that the private ownership of is paramount.
But I never argued that.
Huh?
I never argued that it gives you the right.
No. But I understand you're not arguing that. But the decision didn't argue that.
I know, because the decision was, is it constitutional for Colombia to take away handguns? And it was against Heller who brought the case forward. And the Supreme Court decided that it was unconstitutional for Colombia to try and take away handguns. That was the whole ruling.
What's the reasoning that they said it was unconstitutional?
Because people have a right to defend themselves. And it's a commonly used gun for defense. So that means that
it's
they cannot.
Commonly used. In other words, if it was an uncommonly used weapon, does the state have the right to then come back and say, "Hey, I can ban it under these provisions"?
It depends. I don't think that was ever part of the consideration of the court case, which is why
that's
that
the
when
problem, is they're not sticking strictly to the Constitution here, and that's the problem.
How would you stick to the
decision should revolve around the rights of whether or not a state has the ability, all right, to sit up there and when I say state, I'm talking about governmental agency. Okay.
Sure, but how would you stick to the Constitution in this instance?
I would say that you don't have the right to sit up there and ban any weapon. You have no right to ban any weapon from an individual. So
not even for safety precautions, as in you shouldn't have a nuke because you may destroy the whole country in one hour.
No. The reasoning for not having a nuke is not valid.
So you think everybody should have nukes?
Did I say that?
But that's what the implication is, MC.
No, that's not the implication, and that's the problem. The fact is just because somebody has a nuke or doesn't have a nuke isn't the issue. All right.
To be fair, he said. To be fair, he said ban a little bit earlier, not necessarily safety precautions, common sense guy.
Sorry?
To be fair, I said Nomad said earlier that he thinks that no gun should be banned. And then you sort of shifted it to talking about safety precautions, which
sure.
I just wanted to clarify on that point. As far as nukes go, I'm willing to go so far to say that in theory, even I think that should be allowed. Not that it would in practicality happen en masse or anything like that, but all the same.
And that's the thing. When you start talking about quote unquote these larger weapon systems, whether you're talking about a battleship, all right, whether or not you're talking about a fighter jet, whether or not you're talking about an ICBM or a missile, all right, or a nuke, all right, where the state fails. The state has other methodologies, all right, to limit the uses of those things, to limit those. For example, if you noticed, the state doesn't say anything, all right? The Constitution doesn't say anything about saying, okay, ownership of uranium is illegal.
Well, actually, the Constitution does say that you're not allowed to have harmful substances to yourself. Not the Constitution, but bylaws and laws and
Well,
state
no,
laws.
but it doesn't restrict.
Right.
All right, it doesn't restrict the government from saying you can't do this. Now, there are other restrictions that are federally versus state. Right. For example, if you want to own, if a state wants to ban a certain substance, all right, whereas the federal government can't ban the certain substance, I think that's a legitimate argument to make. It depends on a lot of factors. Don't get me wrong. All right. However, when you start talking about things like nuclear weapons, when you start talking about things like battleships, should a person be allowed to own a battleship, a full-blown battleship? Sure, a person should be allowed to do that.
A tank.
Right, a tank. If you want to be able to own a tank, good luck. Right, if you maintaining the tank, maintaining a weapon system, all right, is not as easy as people think it. Now, can people do that? Could people actually do that? Sure, they could do it. Then and the ownership of it isn't illegal. Okay, and nor should it be illegal. But the ability then to, all right, actually create an artillery round, for example, all right, in order to create an artillery round to actually to put it in the tank, how many people have the ability to do that?
If you have enough money to buy a tank, you have enough money to buy an artillery round for the tank.
Okay, and if you have enough money to buy all that stuff, you also have enough money to subvert the freaking Constitution anyway and subvert the freaking rule of law.
Why would you allow those? Why would you allow those types of people to have access to?
You're not preventing them from having that access.
You literally are by saying that it doesn't matter. You're literally saying that it's okay for them to have it.
It is okay for them to own it,
but they will use it. When you own anything, you use it. Regardless of what that use may be, you still use it. Even if you use it as an ornament, it's still a use.
Right? Really? I mean,
yes. If I hang something up,
it could be used as art, which a lot of people use guns.
Which is what I just said. If it's used as an ornament, it's still being used as an ornament.
Is that use a threat to you?
That depends if you can revert it back or not.
No. It's never a threat to you unless it's being pointed at you and the person is
exactly. That's why I said it depends if you can revert it back or not.
Right, but but a person can issue a threat regardless whether they have that device or any other device.
Sure, but if somebody's threatening
a person can a person can be a threat to you, active threat to you if they swing their fist backward and look like they're about to punch you. Equally speaking.
I completely not agree, but do we agree that there are different levels of threat here? If I'm threatening you with a fist compared to I have a tank and it's working, do you think that there's a varying degree of threat to your life at that point?
No.
Oh, of course. I mean, if somebody goes, if somebody wrongfully points their weapon at an innocent person, I mean that. And only right then at that moment should there be any kind of legal repercussions about them, but not a single second beforehand, that being including the possession of a freaking tank or machine gun or anything like that. The possession itself is not a crime. It's not unethical. It doesn't infringe on anybody's rights. It's when you start pointing it at somebody, when it starts to become an infringement on other people's rights and unethical and etc.
When you threaten to use it. All right. At any point in time, and it doesn't have to be used necessarily saying it's a threat, in my opinion. If you sit up there and say, "I've got a tank," when you tell somebody, "I want you to do this," and the person tells you no, and you go back, "I got a tank," that's a threat. You are actually threatening to use your tank.
That's not what I was meaning, and you know it.
Right.
No, but what we're putting out. But see, what you're trying to say is because a person has more power, all right. Therefore, they're more of a threat, and therefore, society should say, "Okay, boom, let's put a stop to
that." I'm sorry. What do you think my argument is?
Your individual rights.
I'm sorry. What do you think my argument is here?
Your argument is all right. For example, if a person has a tank versus a gun, all right, you think they're more of a threat with a tank than a gun.
Of course they are.
Of course
they are.
Not to you as the individual.
Yes. How
are you in more of a threat from a tank than you are from a gun as an individual?
Simply for the fact that I could run away or dodge or weave from a gun, maybe if I'm really lucky and I'm as fat as I am. But I've got less chance of being able to get out of the way of a tank if it's already close to me than what I would do for a
Well,
gun.
but you can hear a tank coming from a mile away where you can't hear the guy coming at you with a gun. A gun
Sure,
can
but I
be
think
easily
it's a lorry.
concealed. Your view of what's more threatening versus my view of what's more threatening to an individual, all right? It depends on the individual's capabilities and the individual's intent. It has nothing to do with the device itself.
Of course it does. So if I have it, let's take it down another notch. I have a knife, you have a gun. Who's going to win that fight if we're away from each other from about 30 feet? Who's going to win that fight? Me with a knife or you with a gun?
Well, but most likely me with the gun. But I mean, that's not.
So you're a bigger threat then, are you not?
No.
So you're not a bigger threat to me at that point in time.
No, you're the threat is coming from me trying to kill you.
Okay, let me rephrase it this way. There's 3 people. One person is 30 meters.
I think we're working off of. I just want to say very quickly. I think we're working off of 2 different definitions of threat right here. Common Sense Guy is working off of the definition of threat as in the ability to initiate force, whereas Nomad is using the word threat as in they're actively in the process of aggressing on somebody or right about to.
Exactly.
So
which I kind of agree. Sorry, what?
I was going to say, I'll make this distinction then. So I'm standing in a particular place. There's somebody that's 30 meters away that has a knife that wants to kill me. There's somebody that's 30 meters away with a gun that wants to kill me. Who should I attack first or run away from first?
Who should you attack first or run away from first?
Yes.
Kind of, if you say run away from first, it depends on.
Can I answer this question?
It has nothing to do with the weapon.
It's an easy question to answer. But yes,
can I answer this question, Nomad?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay. It depends on who is actively attacking you, Common Sense Guy. If the guy with a knife is like charging at me, I'm going to run away from him and more likely to run at the guy with the gun who has his gun at the low ready. But equally speaking, if the guy with the gun is like charging at me, pointing at me, giving me a nasty, oh, I'm going to fucking kill you kind of look, well then, of course I'm going to try to get away from him. And the knife holder will not be as much of a threat.
Okay, so if we're both under the same skill level, we're all highly trained. All 3 of us are all highly trained, right? We all know what we're doing. We've all been in the army for like 20 years. We know what we're doing, right? We are now doing an active risk assessment for ourselves. Somebody is 30 meters away with a knife. Somebody is 20 meters with a gun that has their gun drawn. The other person is just about to get ready to run at you with a knife. What are you doing and why?
I'm running away from the guy with the knife.
Because not worrying about the guy with the gun.
Oh, in that rhetorical... Wait, Nomad. Wait. In that rhetorical situation, Common Sense Guy, you did not specify that the gun guy was getting aggressive with me. You only specified that the knife guy was getting aggressive with me.
Okay, both are exactly the same. Both want to kill you. Both are 30 meters away. Both are just starting to get ready to attack.
Okay, you put it like that. I'm going to probably do my best to run further away from the gun guy than the knife guy. Or have a shield or something else like that. Because quite honestly, I don't think just merely running away is going to be enough to get away from a gun guy. Running away is going to help with the knife guy because, short range weaponry, unless he's like a high skilled professional, able to throw it in the same way as Jason Statham's character from Expendables.
Yeah.
Okay, but you're talking about a hypothetical where you narrow the conditions down to a specific point of view.
Yes,
right?
but do you know why I did that?
In the opposite way.
Do you know why I did that? Do you know why I did that?
Because, but it doesn't make any sense because you can do the same thing, which is exactly what Dark.
It won't make any sense if you don't know why I did it. Why did I do it?
Because you're trying to sit up there and try and say that under these conditions, this person's supposed to be more dangerous.
No, I'm trying to point out that there are different levels of threat. And when we do threat assessments, we work out who is going to be more threatening to us. When you said before that they don't.
Those threat assessments, while the gun is one of the things, the weapon being used is part of that. The circumstances involved in it are as important, if not more important. That is the least important aspect of this.
Why?
Because the most important aspect of it is the conditions and the where the threat is actually coming from.
But that's why I
Okay.
use the hypothetical to show
But
you that
you
even
use
with
the hypothetical where you sit up there and gave a whole slew of conditions, all right, in order to get a result. You can do the same thing with the knife.
yes,
where
because Darkon straight away already conceded that when you do a threat analysis, you're looking to see who's going to have the immediate effect, who's going to affect you the quickest, and it's generally the gun guy because he can get to you quicker because of the bullet, rather than the knife guy.
We're under those circumstances, yes, but that's not always the circumstance with a threat that you have to deal with. You see, you created a situation where speed and distance become important, all right? But speed and distance isn't the most important thing. The initiation of the threat is, all right? And so to sit up there and say that the weapon, all right, can mitigate this is nonsensical.
Is it easier to stab someone compared to pulling a trigger?
Oh, it's much easier to stab someone.
Okay, I know people that use guns, and I know people that have stabbed people, and it's harder to stab somebody than it is to shoot someone.
Only okay. There are conditions. There are obviously conditions. But
We're talking about psychological.
If a person isn't expecting it, it's much easier to stab somebody, and it's much quicker, depending upon how far away you
No,
are.
I meant to the person doing it, not what the damage will be afterwards. I meant for the person doing it. I'm talking about the psychological aspect of using the weapon.
The person who is going to commit the crime is the threat. Now, that person doesn't become a threat depending upon which weapon he uses, because he will sit up there and try to create situations with whatever weapon he has chosen to use. All right, he's able to act upon.
I know this. This is why I use the two different types of weapons. That's why I've already said that there's a difference.
Wait.
Go ahead, Darko.
I just wanted to hear Common Sense Guy complete his thought was a thing I was about to say. That was all.
It unfortunately, until we get to the understanding that we do threat assessments, I'm not going to be able to complete my point because it will just get thrown out.
Well, I'm not saying we don't do threat assessments, but
that's the whole
there
point.
Are conditions on those.
I know that there's conditions, MC. I know that there's conditions, buddy. I'm not saying that it's a relatively straightforward thing. I'm talking about genualities, not specifics.
Well, but you gave specifics to specific
because
conditions.
You wouldn't accept a generality, so I had to go into specifics.
Because your generality falls apart, all right, with the idea that it is the weapon that's the primary concern.
When it comes to somebody that's it does. If somebody's pointed a gun at me, I'm going to be more worried about the person with a gun than I am with a knife. It's just the way that it is.
All right. If a guy sits up there and is pointing a knife at me is closer, all right, and the guy who has the gun isn't pointing at me, all right, where's the threat? The threat's the guy with the knife, right?
Sorry, repeat that so I can understand that.
Right.
Sorry.
So you have a guy with a gun, but he's not pointing at you. The guy with the knife is pointing at you. Which one's the threat?
Well, obviously the one with the knife. That's why the reason why we have a different understanding of what the threat detail is. I'm talking about the threat detail.
The weapon was immaterial in this case. The weapon, having the weapon or not having the weapon, which is what you're going to. All right, because eventually you're saying, well, I want to restrict the ability to have that weapon.
What my argument is, MC. You're presuming what my argument is before I've even got to it. You're arguing something I'm not even talking about, my friend.
Yeah, I feel like I gotta reiterate what Shar Ati said a lot earlier in the live chat. I think it was her, anyways. That you need to let people finish their thoughts more. Nomad.
Okay, well, but you can't use a generality like that you're trying to use when about a weapon. Okay. When it in and of itself is not the issue. All right. This is my point. My point is you're saying the weapon is an issue. I'm telling you that the weapon isn't an issue.
Right.
So, yeah. By the way, for the record, it was Shar Ati. She said, "MC, give people time to speak."
Yeah. Shut up, Sir Artie. Freaking hand.
So
I'm joking. It's a joke. Which is the worst. She understands.
So if we're in the middle of a crowd and you have somebody who's active that has a knife and somebody who's active that has a bomb, but they don't know that they have the bomb at this minute in time, so they're all walking around them, the same as the person that's still hiding the knife, who's going to kill more people quickly, the bomb or the knife?
More people. Who's going to kill more people quickly?
Yes.
Who could kill more people quickly?
No, not who could, because the knife until he's put down is obviously going to continuously be able to stab. So, because the knife doesn't need to be reload. I'm talking about continuous. Who's the more dangerous threat?
All right, but dangerous? Neither. They're both dangerous. There's no difference in danger to an individual.
There's no difference in danger from a bomb guy to a knife guy.
Nope.
If I can I answer this? If I had to give my answer, in theory, the knife guy is more dangerous and can do more damage than the bomb guy, at least to physical human beings. Say that the bomb guy sets up his bomb in a room of 20 people, and that's the amount that he strictly kills is just those 20 people. Whereas a knife guy, if he doesn't get stopped, if he just ends up killing people that are armed with nothing but their bare hands and don't have any means of self-defense in the police or any kind of guy, who has the actual tools to defend themselves from the knife guy, then the knife guy can, in theory, just go killing 21, 25, 30, and even more people, just endlessly.
I completely agree.
With the same bloody knife.
I completely agree, because he doesn't have to need to reload or do anything. He can just keep on stabbing them. I completely get it. I understand. But my point is, would I be able to defend myself or have a chance of defending myself against the person with the knife or against the bomb? Who have I got more chance of defending myself against?
No, it shouldn't say who you have more chance. Where do you have more options? All right. Obviously, you would have more options with the guy with the knife. All right.
Thank you. That's all I wanted.
All right. However, no, but there's a caveat to this. All right, and that is this. All right, in response to when you're talking about threat assessment here, how many knives are out there versus how many bombs are out there? And in order to make a knife, hold on, in order to make a knife, all right, how much easier is it to make a knife than it is a bomb?
People do them in prison cells all the time, so that should answer that question.
It's not. Well, they do both actually. They can make knives in prison cells as well as bombs in prison cells. So
right,
the more you know.
More knives and more bombs in prison cells. CSG. Sorry for
they're just not very. They're just not used because you need more materials for it. You can still make bombs. You can still do pipe bombs in prison, right?
But there's fewer. There's far fewer of them, right?
Agreed, because it's harder to get the materials.
Right, but the devices.
Bombs are also more high profile, FYI.
Yeah. The thing is, we're now getting into a semantic argument where all I was trying to talk about was the threat risk.
Well, but the threat risk, when you talk about a threat risk of a weapon or a weapon system, all right, sans the individuals, okay, then you have to start including a lot of other things aside from, okay,
yes, because you wouldn't accept the premise.
Point of action, how much damage does it do?
Well, one you have a higher chance of surviving from, and one you have less of a chance of surviving from. No, so even in the chance of it being used, you still have more of a chance of surviving from a knife attack than you do from a gunshot.
Actually, that's only recent, right? And to be honest, with a bomb blast, there's a lot of there's very few people killed in a bomb blast because, quite frankly, very few people know how to make the damn things correctly. All right?
Yeah, and they're also limited to size and walls and things like that. I get the difference. It's not just
limited to size and walls. It also is. I mean, there's a whole lot of reasons. I'm not going to go into that because, quite frankly, there's bans against it. All right, but the thing is what is when you talk about an assessment of a weapon and a weapon system itself, you also have to sit there and talk about the spread. Right now, the advantage of a bomb, all right, quite frankly, is the ease of use. The disadvantage of the bomb is logistics. But you can make those advantages, disadvantages arguments about every single weapon system that exists.
I'm just waiting to see if you can pick up what my point is.
But what's your point?
I'm just waiting to see if you know what it is, because you seem to be arguing with me a lot.
But okay, what is your point? Tell me what your point is, because I don't understand what you're trying to say.
My point is that when we do generalities, we are talking about the difference in what we classify as a threat risk. So even though there are differences in how people use it, how people could use it, the spread of it, how could you reload it, how does it work? I get that there are differences. and there are contingencies to how you get to use that thing. So, as you said before, with a tank, you need to make sure you've got enough diesel in it, or petrol in it, or gas in it to make sure that you can drive the fucker, and then make sure that you've got artillery. I get that, but all things being considered, what would be a bigger risk to somebody?
Right, but you're saying all other you're making those other assumptions along with it. And I'm
Yes,
telling
because
you
if you can
that
buy a
your
tank,
ability to define whether or not a weapon is dangerous or not is not just simply, okay, this one thing. You're trying to narrowly focus on the fact that there's a weapon out there and that weapon's scary and you're afraid that weapon is scary.
is that really what you think my argument is?
That is what I'm hearing, yeah.
So you really
I
think
was about to ask the question too, where you're arguing devil's advocate that we should be not that this is actually your position, but are you arguing the devil's advocate for the position of that we should be banning or regulating things based off of threat risk?
yes,
The term
danger
that
to
you use.
society. Danger to society. So if somebody was able to buy a tank, diesel it up or gas it up, and just drive it around, that would be more of a danger than with somebody with a gun. Before anybody says anything, you have somebody in the UK that has done this with a JCB diesel operated digger, and somebody in America that has done exactly the same thing that has killed more people than
Killdozer.
Yes.
I heard that story. And by the way, I'm not so sure how I like the response and aftermath of that, but I will say that it was pretty shitty that the government was like closing off all roads from his establishment.
I know.
Just for the record, everybody.
Yeah, the situation that led up to his absolute craze is, in my opinion, a little bit justified, and I get that. But you have to realize that when we're doing a threat for society and a risk for society, we have to try and make sure that we protect the most amount of people, right?
But I guess I just want to say I don't think that I don't think we should be regulating people's rights based off of a threat risk, particularly. I mean, because that is just working off of the assumption that we know that this person or that person is going to most definitely use the weapon against other innocent people, which I don't like working off of that. I only like to legislate based off of what people are doing actually in the moment or the aftermath of unethical shit that they've done to other innocent people, that kind of stuff. But one other thing that we also have to keep in mind with this whole threat risk assessment is also the practicality and ability to gain the resources in order to carry out such a threat, like Wiko saying about a tank, because a tank requires a lot of resources to operate and move around and actually kill people with. Not a whole lot of people are going to use that as their go-to to kill people. They're more likely going to go for a pistol or even a full auto or a bomb or anything else like that is a little bit cheaper in resource, or a knife for that matter, which ends up in more violence in the U.S. than any semi-auto rifle.
All right, but there's one more thing. You said which one?
Statistically speaking.
Yeah, no, you're exactly right, Darkon. But
yeah, I agree.
One other thing, CSG, is you said which one is going to protect more people. Okay.
Sorry, what did I say?
You said which one of these, when society's coming down, which one should they be looking at to try and protect more people with?
No, not protect more people with, but from.
From. Okay. Well, if you want to say from. But the problem is you're looking at it from an instantaneous action, not over time.
Of course. How else am I supposed to look at it if I'm talking about
because when you talk about the number of people killed, right? Let's take a look at the number of people who've been killed by pistols or even swords, for that matter. All right, sure. Throughout the span of time, with the number of people killed by guns.
So when did guns come into effect, and when did swords come into effect? Well, if you're going to go back in history and try and be disingenuous, we can both do that.
You see my point. My point
no, I don't.
Okay, my point is when you talk about what's more deadly, all right, or what should society be worried about? Okay, what they shouldn't be worried about isn't what weapon is being utilized, because over time, for example, all right, how many people have been killed by nuclear weapons?
Sorry?
How many people have been killed by nuclear weapons?
Just the people in Hiroshima and Nagasaki.
So should people be more worried about nuclear weapons, or should they be more worried about artillery rounds?
Well, more people have been killed by artillery rounds. That's the reason why they're considered, more worrying on a battlefield, because there's more of them.
But you're going to tell me if the enemy has a nuke or the enemy has an artillery, you're going to be worried about the guy with the artillery?
No, I'm
Knowing
going to be
that they're
worried
both
about the
the
guy
enemy
that.
and they're both the threat.
No, yeah, they are both a threat, but again, the degrees of threat are different. The person that has a nuke, if he's willing to use it, it obviously has a much higher death toll if he uses that. The threat is higher with the nuclear weapon.
But that's an instantaneous death toll, right? If the guy sits with the artillery, sits up there and does it over a period of a year, all right, he can easily exceed the death toll of that single nuke.
Only if he has enough resources for it, correct?
Well, yeah, but in comparison to the resources of building a nuke.
But if we have one nuke versus a generalized artillery.
When the United States used nuclear weapons, how many nuclear weapons did we have when we used them in World War II?
Oh, sorry, I have no idea on that one.
Okay, when we used the nukes in World War II, all right, we used both of them. Now, could we create a third one? Yes, but during that time,
in which we did.
Right. Well, we had a third one that we detonated. We were there's people I know what Darkon's referring to, and we don't know for sure. But
no, actually, no. I don't know if you thought I was referring to some conspiratorial or obscurely known fact or anything like that. I was saying a third of nuke was created because, lo and behold, modern day there are thousands of nukes that the U.S. now possesses. Yes. So there was a third and a fourth and a fifth and so on and so forth.
But
to the amount that we have now.
Not at the time. Not at the time we dropped both nuclear weapons.
What is your actual point?
My point is it comes down to how easy is it to sit up there and build these weapon systems, all right? And that then becomes the defining characteristics, not the instantaneous death toll from a societal standpoint of worrying about it, all right? From a society, we should be more worried about as a social dynamic, more worried about artillery. Because it does more damage to people, or it has the ability to do more damage to people than a singular nuke does in regards to how we're looking at it. Now, once again, you use certain terms. Are the willingness to use a nuke, all right? The ability to detonate the nuke, okay? But when you talk about a weapon, you've got to talk about everything involved in that weapon, from its production, all right, to its use, okay? Not just its use. And that's what you've always focused on. You always focus on the use. And at that point is how you define, this is how you do a threat assessment, to define the danger of that weapon system is defined strictly on what can I get as a kill total from an instantaneous use.
So when I'm talking about a threat risk, I'm talking about an actual instantaneous threat risk. So I'm talking about an imminent threat, not the case of what it can be, might be, or should be. I'm talking about if it happens, what is going to happen? What's the worst that can happen? That's what I'm talking about.
But
you're taking into account the threat risk only after everybody has readied their weapons for full-on usage.
In the way that we used it beforehand, yeah. So if we have somebody using an analogy,
well, I'm not so sure if I agree with that criteria, nor Nomad would, because we're trying to take into account also the practicality and the ability to gain the resources necessary for readying those weapons.
That we're allowed to have nukes. I get it.
But right. This is the point. As an individual, remember, there's a difference between nuclear weapons as an individual and the difference of a nuclear weapon as a country.
What is it?
The ability to sit up there and be able to create it.
If you have one, do you not have one?
Well, how did you get it?
That's the point. If you are able to get one and you have one, we're talking about people having one.
Right. All right. Well, what's it going to take to get that weapon? How many people is that going to apply to worldwide? And so, as an individual,
do you think I'm saying that everybody can get a nuke? Is that what you're trying to say to me? You think that I'm saying that everybody can get a nuke?
I'm saying the exact opposite. And you're worried about taking away an individual's rights, and I'm trying to indicate to you, you don't need to take away that individual's right to do that, because the ability of individuals over the large scale isn't great.
You don't need to have a good skill if you're sending out a nuke, do you, brother?
You do.
No, I think he's talking about ability as in gathering the resources and also putting in the calculations for how you're going to program the nuke on where it should land, how it should fly, and all that stuff.
Does
How
that
to
make it
maintain
more
it,
dangerous
how
or
you're
less
going to
dangerous?
transport it, how you're going to activate it.
I want to answer Common Sense guy's question to me. Does that make it more dangerous or less dangerous?
Yes. If you don't have the means of being able to use it properly, does that make something more dangerous or less dangerous?
I'd say a bit less dangerous because if they don't know how to operate properly, it's just going to blow up in their face as opposed to it launching full range and hitting their actual target.
Yes, which means that somebody else is going to die that wasn't your target.
Yeah, it's also going to blow up in the immediate vicinity of the person as well. I mean, it highly depends on the population area that the person is operating and launching the nuke from.
Yeah, there's a lot of dynamics there. But you just said usage. Okay, well, what if the person wants to use it as an art?
If I may say something can I say something to help speed along this part of the conversation? Common Sense guy? If everybody was able to get the weapon of their choice and along with all the appropriate resources and skills just automatically like preset, then yeah, no shit, a nuke is like has more of a threat risk assessment to it. But in all reality, that's not the case, though, because of the fact that people in reality have to gain the skills and the proper resources to operate it beforehand, which is why that in all reality, it is not as big of a threat of people using it against innocent people as, say, some piece of shit psychopath with a knife.
So why does which then goes to the corollary, if that being the case, and I agree with you, Dark, on that is the case, then why are you going through the histrionics of saying, well, we need to ban this from an individual use or from an individual from ownership?
Because a corporation is classified as an individual in law.
Okay.
A corporation like Amazon can then purchase something like a nuclear weapon if it
that
wanted
was Plessy versus Ferguson to find that.
Honestly, I will. Sorry, go on.
No, that's all I was saying. Go on.
Okay, well, I just want to say, in all honesty, I think that's a bit of a slight different subject. The classification, actually, it isn't even really up for debate. I don't even know how people get the idea that corporations are people or anything like that. That's one of the things I disagree with Dinesh D'Souza on. And honestly, I'm just going to say it full out. Corporations are not people, but they are owned by people. But that does not mean that a corporation has its own rights or even should legally have its own rights for somebody to like work around some dumbass loophole and to find some kind of justification to, donate more money than they could just by their own self because they own a corporation.
Sorry, that was Tillman.
Politicians donate more money to politicians. Sorry.
I just want to correct myself. That was not Plessy versus Ferguson. I think it was Tilley or Tillman, the Tillman Act, right? That defined it that way. But when you start talking about corporations, okay, now let's talk about a corporation. Why would a corporation want to have a nuke?
Because they want to get rid of their competition. They have a dispute with the government. Anything, right? If you're allowed all of the weapons to fight back, there is no sort of scenario that might be able to happen. That's the reason why we protect society from scenarios that might happen.
If a corporation had a nuclear weapon, you're telling me that they would use it to try and get rid of their competition, right? Is there competition hiding away in where their customers that give them a livelihood? Is that competition somehow hiding away? All right, where they can be easily taken out by a nuke? No. So once again, if you start taking a look at the reality there, the reality is the corporation is not going to sit up there and create a nuke to have a nuke, right? Now they may create a nuke and want a nuke so they can sell the nuke, all right? But then who's the customers that have the capability of purchasing the nuke? At which point you're in the position of saying, okay, you've got to build the nukes. That a corporation is in the process of building and selling nuclear weapons to people. How is that any different though than when Iran does it or Iraq does it or any other country that wants to?
Iran hasn't built any nuclear weapons because we stopped them. Same as Iraq was stopped. So that's the reason why we stopped them, because we didn't want them to have nuclear weapons, right?
Okay. Well, then you could sit up there and stop a corporation from doing that too. No one said
not if they're allowed to do it. MC, no.
You have to sit there to build it. What does it take to build a nuke?
Quite a lot, but if you're able to sell it to countries that want to buy it,
hold on. But once again, you got to sit up there and be able to have access to the resources. Our corporations do they have easy access to those resources, or do they have to be licensed for those?
This is your example, MC.
Yes, I know, and this is where it comes. This is where it breaks down. The reason you don't have corporations building nukes for anybody and everybody is that in order to get the materials, which the government can limit, all right, and does limit, all right, they sit up there and prevent them from getting that material to be used in that manner. It's very effective. It's the same thing for poison. All right, should you be able to have poison in your house? Many people do. Do they have it in concentrations that are dangerous? No. Why? Because they're not licensed, all right, for having that material, all right, in that kind of a quantity. So you can limit these things without infringing upon the ownership of the individual.
So I'm kind of dumbfounded because we're talking about the idea of the Second Amendment, right? And we just went into the fact of, well, you could go into the fact of corporations could build nuclear weapons, and then you changed it and said, well, they can't because they may not be able to get all the materials, right? So they can't really build them, they can't really sell them.
Well, we know corporations do that. In the United States, it is
only that are allowed to, MC.
Right?
They have to have specific contracts.
They have to have
specific
contracts, and they have to have.
Then you're putting regulations on the Second Amendment. Well done, happy day. We've now on the same.
Those regulations, but the actual ownership isn't regulated. This is my point. Okay. There's a difference
until they're sold, who owns them?
Until what?
Until they're sold, who owns the nuclear weapons? In this scenario.
Who has it? All right, who owns it? The person who purchased it.
Listen to the words.
Mm-hmm.
In this scenario,
no, he said before they were sold is what he said.
But they're not allowed to build them before they're sold.
No, he said. Let me answer your question, CSG. The person who manufactures the nukes.
Thank you very much. Okay. Why is that so hard?
because it's not reality.
Ah, brother.
Right? No, seriously.
I mean, in all reality, we're getting into
a corporation out there build a nuclear weapon and then go, okay, our government, do you want it, or does the government contract you to build that weapon first?
In all reality,
contracts. No, sorry, you're not talking about contracts. You're talking about the ability to be able to build it. This is your example.
But the ability to be able to build it, all right, depends upon the contract, all right, that you have to get the material.
Not in your ability, it doesn't. Not in your ability, it doesn't.
No, the ability to build a weapon requires the ability to access resources. Do you have access to every single resource that you want access to?
If you are allowed to build nuclear weapons in the hypothetical that we have decided to set up,
we're talking reality, yes. Because the hypothetical that you are using doesn't exist.
That's the whole point of a hypothetical, which we were already talking about.
Well, okay, but what we're really eventually coming down to the Second Amendment in ownership, right?
So yes, if a company builds something that's a corporation, who owns what they build until they sell it?
Until they sell it, all right, they do, all right, but you don't build nukes that way. Let me ask you a question. Before you before you contract a building being built, who owns the building?
What do you mean contracting to build?
Let's say
Are we talking privately or are we
I want a
talking
Sears
governmentally?
Tower. Let's say I want a Sears Tower down here in the middle of Tucson, right? I want something along the lines of the Sears Tower.
Have you cleared it with the city limits yet?
And I own the land, right? I own the land.
Have you cleared it with city limits? Even if you own land, you still have to have some sort of form of clearance, do you not?
We're just going to assume that the city is not involved in this game.
Okay, so we're now doing a hypothetical. We're not talking reality.
Well,
Carry on.
talking. Well, no, I'm trying to set the hypothetical that you've given me. Okay, which is you're saying that the building already exists, but it doesn't yet. Now the building will be owned by me, but I'll have to hire contractors in order to build it. And the same thing applies to nuclear weapons. All right, you're not going to have people building a nuclear weapon, all right, that haven't been contracted to it in a corporate setting. Why?
Dude,
because
they are the corporation.
Has a reason for trying to sell those things.
I don't understand how you're not following this. I don't understand it, my friend. Right, when you contract those people to build your house, it's still your house. You contracted them to build it.
Right.
When the corporation is building the nuclear weapons to then sell the nuclear weapons on, it's still them building them before they sell it on.
But the idea of saying that the corporation is building the weapon to sell, okay? The corporation isn't building the weapon to sell. There's no corporation out there that can build a weapon like that to sell because they don't have access to those resources. See, you start going down the hypothetical, and then you got to add other hypotheticals. Well, suppose they had access to those resources as well.
You do realize why they don't have the access, right?
I do realize why they don't have the access.
Why do they not have access?
But that's
no.
Different.
Why do they not have access?
Because they haven't been granted access to it.
Thank you. So they do have access if they wanted to, right? But there are stipulations and regulations that stop them.
Not just because they want to. Somebody else has to give them that access. It's on another party entirely. They themselves.
Do you think we're talking about the Second Amendment? We're talking about the Second Amendment. What do you think this is in regards to?
I know this is in regards to this. It's in regards to ownership.
Yes. That's the reason why I brought up the hypothetical for your extreme hypothetical that you should be able to own nukes.
Right. You should be able to. It shouldn't be illegal for you to own a nuke. It may be illegal for you to acquire a nuke, but it shouldn't be illegal necessarily for you to own.
See you later, Darkon. I understand, buddy. I'll see you again.
No. I wasn't trying to say that I was going to leave. The reason why I was trying to get your attention was because I was looking at the live chat. Did not know if my audio was coming through because my phone is weird with me trying to pull up different tabs. Sure. But I kind of agree with the lawyer bot and what he said earlier in the live chat. Nomad, we've been on about nukes left and right to when that is the most extreme case known to mankind. I'd rather go towards the history of the Second Amendment and how it could apply currently. Okay. So I'm kind of in agreement. Like we gone down this rabbit trail of talking about nukes, which is like an interesting, weird, wacky, wild, rhetorical situation to be talking about. But in all reality, and Capistani tactical nukes is not a reality, everybody. And I think we should stick with reality when it comes to rifles and pistols, which is in all practicality, and even machine guns for that matter, which is in all practicality what we want to allow en masse for the general populace. You know.
Okay. No, sure. You're right. You're right. I apologize.
So if I may help steer this conversation so as a live chat can be a little bit less frustrated.
All right, please do. Go ahead.
Well, I just did right there. But when it comes to risk assessment, let's take the example of an AR-15. If I had to answer the questions that CS Guy has asked in regards of nukes and apply it to AR-15s instead,
that's just AR-15s.
yeah, that's what I was. That's what I was getting to. Strictly speaking, if they had all the resources and skills, then obviously yes, AR-15s are assuming that they also have the same malicious intent, they can be a more risky weapon to be allowing people than a knife or anything else like that. The rhetorical situation of you that you asked a whole lot earlier in this live stream of who would you rather run away from, the guy with the knife or the guy with the gun? Obviously, but I don't think, like I'm going to reiterate to like I have said in the past of this live stream as well, I don't believe in legislating people's rights based off of the possibility of what damage they could do if they got malicious. I believe in legislating if they actually do get malicious in the current chronological period.
Okay, that's absolutely fine. So I don't actually have a problem with people owning guns. I don't even have a problem with people owning machine guns. The thing that I have more of an
So I
issue
guess
with.
okay, go on. I guess that's what I was going to ask you is what is your issue that you want to bring up in response to the pro gun rights crowd?
That I do think that there are limitations on the Second Amendment. For instance, I think that if somebody is suicidal, I don't think that they should be able to have access to a gun simply because of what the implications could be from them owning that gun, taking their life or taking other people's lives. As you mentioned before.
If they want to, honestly, this may sound kind of crass, but honestly, if they want to take their own life, that is their rights, and that's not them infringing on anyone else's rights. As far as them like killing other people, that is why that people like me and Nomad advocate that people do get arms so they can defend themselves from that psychopath who is all like, oh, life is miserable, so I'm going to get my 5 minutes of attention by shooting up a dozen people and then shooting myself. Or even calling for armed security guards within a public schooling space, whatnot.
So the thing is with that is that if you have psychological issues, as in you are depressed, you're more prone to have forms of outbursts. So one of the biggest reasons and aspects of gun deaths in America is suicide. Literally, is it literally the biggest thing in America for that is suicides.
Right.
Yeah, I mean it's like what 20,000 gun deaths per year are made up of suicides, and only 10,000 are made up of homicides. Yeah. If we're looking at the statistics, I mean,
thereabouts. Yeah, I think that's pretty close. Two thirds of the gun deaths are suicides, approximately.
I mean, it may have possibly gone down ever since the COVID lockdown started. I mean, we're living in a post-COVID world right now, and honestly, all this gun control debate, most of it happened pre-pandemic. Post-pandemic, we have people isolating themselves from one another, so obviously the numbers I just mentioned right there are probably, well, homicides are going to probably be lower, but suicides are probably going to be going up, which...
Yeah, so I've got the statistics for 2020, and they're pretty much all right. It's around about, out of the 45,222 deaths from 2020, the number from suicides at the use of a gun, this breaks down to, hang on just a minute.
So 45,000 gun deaths, how many of them were suicides?
No, I just want to actually get the actual point because I broke it up into different aspects.
Oh, I thought you had an actual article in front of you that had them neatly put together on total gun deaths, total gun deaths by homicide, total gun deaths by suicide.
I do. Just trying to make sure that I get the numbers right.
Okay.
So when we were
sorry.
So when we are talking about the total number for 2020, for the total number of people that died via a gun, it's 46,000 or around 46,000. The actual number is 45,222. That means 54% of the 45,222 is a number of suicides. This breaks down to obviously 24,942 that have been killed by the use of a gun. You have the case fatality rates by suicide methods. So if you choose any of these methods, these are actually the rate in which that you are most likely going to die. So if you use a firearm to kill yourself, you are probably 82.5% likely to die from that. If you try to drown yourself or submerge yourself, it's 65.9. That is almost a 20% difference in survivability from just using a different method. Most people would think that, most people that would think about killing themselves seem to use the perception of either cutting themselves, drugging themselves, or jumping. So most people that do that, the fatality rates for jumping is 44.5% fatality. That means that if you jumped, you have over a 50% chance of surviving from it, compared to the almost 100, almost 80, over 80% of dying from something. If you were to
dying
yourself,
of using a gun on themselves,
the fatality of it, the fatality rate.
The problem is intent.
Right.
In measuring intent here.
Yeah, I mean that's really. Well, not just intent, but also of what their actions are panning out to be. Like maybe you are of a different point of view than me or Nomad, and you don't think that suicide is really a person's own right. I mean, it's something that has to be dealt with. I agree, which I think the pandemic is one of the things that is kind of aggravated suicide rates within the United States and within the world as a whole, for that matter, as well. And so, therefore, that's one reason why we should not be artificially shutting down all of society in either one measure or another. And really any measure, in my opinion, via the government saying, oh, you cannot do your business here or whatnot. But even if in a totally no longer lockdown world, if people are still committing suicide, I don't see what the solution is to that problem that would not infringe upon other people's rights in an unjust manner. Like if somebody else wants to shoot themselves, it ain't my responsibility. So why should my right to get an AR-15 be slowed down or infringed upon?
That's not what I'm saying. So,
well, I'm okay. Maybe that's not actually your position, but I'm just stating as a general argument here to the people who will use suicide as a justification to say, "Oh yes, let's ban guns," because I think progressive voice or people like him might almost be of that mindset. They don't explicitly say it, but they constantly use or not constantly, but I remember them using suicide as a justification to start banning or at least heavily regulating guns in response to Ben Shapiro, when Ben Shapiro was responding to David Hogg and all the Parkland shooting victims, who was all like, ban guns now, etc. But yeah. And I don't know, maybe you are of the same mindset as me and Nomad, that when it comes right down to it, it is a person's own right to take their own life. They're not taking anyone else's life except for their own. So therefore, why make the person B suffer because person A is hurting no one but themselves?
So I don't have a problem with the fact of if you're not suicidal, buy guns. But if you are suicidal, I think that there should be a regulation on there to check with a doctor to see if you are suicidal or not. Because
but you have right there now you have a problem, because you're saying, who do I trust to sit up and determine whether or not I'm suicidal or not?
I don't know, maybe doctors.
Right. Well, I'm sorry, but I don't have the same view of doctors you do.
And also, I guess the question is, what is the enforcement method that we do for all these people who we think are so crazy that they need to see a therapist before they take their own life? Are we going to start forcing them at gunpoint, go see a therapist or else?
What do you mean by that?
Like, are we going to arrest or even find somebody who is crazy and might be suicidal because they refuse to see a therapist like the doctors recommend them?
Right. So if a doctor says...
In this proposal of yours, I mean.
Sure. So if a doctor was to say that after I have, because you went to them, and the doctor says, I believe that this person is suicidal, and when you do a gun check to be able to do this, you get in contact with the doctor, and the doctor says, I don't think that this person should have this gun for the moment because they seem to be a suicide risk. You know, like we do when we put people into prison. when we put people into psychological trauma at hospitals. You know, when we put people on literal suicide watch.
But that's an infringement on the rights, maybe not just as much, but still as locking them away in a hospice, in a mental ward.
But I wasn't trying to say that we should lock them up. I'm trying
No,
to
you're
say
not,
that,
but you're kind of advising that maybe they should not be allowed to get a gun, is what you're saying.
yes, for that period of time. Suicide doesn't always mean that you're going to always be suicidal.
Right, but the problem is trust. You trust the doctors to almost always sit up there and be clinically diagnose this. Okay, one of the things that I've been trying to point out is doctors are as politically minded as everybody else, and in our country today, specifically the United States today, could you trust that the doctor is making a medical decision versus a political one in this case?
Sorry, I was just reading something. What did you say again?
You see, you have an innate trust in the doctors.
Right.
Okay. I don't have an innate trust in the doctors anymore. Okay. That's all gone. That's gone to the wayside. And the reason for it is doctors are as willing, all right, to make a political decision as they are a medical one. I have seen it. Okay. And what's more is in that kind of scenario that you're going, how do you know that doctor who's making that assessment about you being suicidal is making that assessment because of his politics, or is he making that assessment because he's making a medical decision? All right. And at what rate do you have doctors making these?
Well,
I can show you in America today, there's a hell of a lot of doctors that you keep saying that I should sit up there and trust that aren't making the decisions based on medicine. They're making that decision based on other criteria, and politics is one of them.
Yeah, okay. COVID aside, when we talk about psychology, it's not a case of when we have one doctor that things do not get reviewed. So if we're doing something from a licensing point of view, the doctors that do the review also get reviewed. So it's not a case of, oh, well, this doctor is politically against me.
Who's reviewing? Who watches the watcher? Other doctors, and it's a hand watching.
And then the government also reviews it as well. So you have Republicans and Democrats that will be reviewing
it. Even if you have Republicans and Democrats, it's government or not government. I'm not worried about who's running the government. Okay, I'm talking about the government in and of itself. The government cannot be trusted.
Why?
And the government, why? Because the government has proven time and time again, it makes decisions based on the government's best interest, not on the individual's best interest, which is what you're trying to take away in this case.
I'm not trying to take anything away.
Well, in this case, I'm not talking about, I use a poor wording, but you're talking about an individual right. You're talking about infringing on an individual's rights. Okay.
No, I'm not actually talking about infringing the right. I'm talking about a time period of where that needs to be reviewed.
But you're making the conclusion that this time period, the decision for this time period, is left up to the government.
No, I'm not.
Yes.
No, I'm
not. I mean,
who watches
the
watcher? Okay. The doctor? Go ahead. I'm sorry.
It's up to the doctors, but it's backed up by government decree that the doctors shall deny these mental cases their gun rights.
I mean, that's a poor way of phrasing it, but I understand your meaning. But what
you said you do or don't understand what I'm meaning?
No, I understand what you're meaning. I was just saying it was a poor way of phrasing, suicide people as mental cases. That's all I was meaning.
Okay. Well, excuse my bluntness, but sorry, suicidal people. We love you, and we hope you don't kill yourselves. In all seriousness.
Yeah. When I'm talking about this, I'm talking about the fact that when you look at the fact that when people try to use suicide as a means to a way of escaping a short-term problem. It's a long-term fix to a short-term problem. I'm sure we've all heard that as a phraseology, right? So if we know that we have a good chunk of all suicides, which is around about, I believe, depending on if you're looking at men or if you're looking at women, between 45 and 51% of those people that commit suicide use a gun. Out of those 45 to 51%, you have an what was it, an 81.5% chance of dying from it, compared to a 20% to the 20% less chance of dying from the next choice. So if we look at the rates of how people actually, if they survive suicide, that they don't actually want to attempt suicide again, that's the bit that I'm talking about. It's a long-term fix to a short-term problem. So the general statistic for that is 9 out of 10 people that who attempt suicide and survive it will not go on to commit suicide again. Now, that's more of a colloquial term. It's approximately 7%, so between 5 and 11% of attempters eventually die by suicide, but approximately 23% that reattempted had non-fatality, and 70% of those people had no further attempts. That's a lot of people that you could save by just doing this one added form of regulation that doesn't actually stop anybody from specifically getting a gun. It's just a time period of it, a cooling off period.
But you're saying that government, there is no such thing as government overreach. That you're assuming that this this long-term solution, as you put it, right, that it won't be affected at some point. And when you know that that's not the case, if you put a long-term solution in, okay, with government interference, that government will begin to sit up there and expand and encroach on this. Okay,
so
we know that they're going.
Because I think you misunderstood what I meant by a long-term, a short-term solution for a long-term problem or whatever. I think you misunderstood. I was talking about the suicide, not the government.
I know you're talking about a short-term suicide. That there's the short-term solution for themselves. But the problem is that your solution requires a long-term governmental overreach that has to be in place for a long period of time.
It's an overreach because of the infringement on the mentally ill person's gun rights.
So, we not already take away people that have mental health issues rights already?
Yeah,
if they're considered
wrong.
A danger or a problem to themselves or others.
All right.
Yeah, I'm sure, and I'm going to say, as a generality, right now, I think that's wrong.
So
I don't want people who have suffered PTSD or OCD or mentally ill in really any ways to have their gun rights infringed upon.
But that's not what I mean when I'm talking about the mental health advocacy. I'm not talking about somebody that is a compulsive water cleaner or washes their hands all the time, not allowed to get guns. I'm talking about somebody that has.
Well, I don't understand the technical different. I don't understand the different technical, what's the word I'm looking for? Terms as far as mental illness goes, but you still get my point, though.
Well, no, that's the reason, because I'm specifically talking about suicidal people. So I'm not talking about people that have.
My point stands for suicidal people, too.
So you're happy with 51% of people that use guns to commit suicide? You're happy with that?
No, I'm not happy with that. I just don't find it worth. Well, I mean, are most people who are mentally ill committing suicide when they get themselves a possession of a gun?
But I'm specifically talking about suicidal people, not people that have mental health issues.
Right, but the problem is
okay.
determining people that. How do you know somebody's suicidal unless they try?
Because we have a way of determining if they're clinically depressed and if they're determined to be on suicide watch. We have a way of being. You don't like psychology.
We put people on suicide watch. That doesn't mean necessarily they were suicidal. We're just saying that there's a risk there, right? We're assessing them as a risk, right?
Yeah, I forgot. You don't like psychology, do you? I forgot.
No, I don't like the government involvement in any of this.
But doctors are not government.
No, but the doctors themselves, all right, are part of the government.
Everybody's a part of the government by your definition, then.
No. In this case, it has to do with the profession. Their profession is controlled by the government, right?
So how are doctors a part of the government? Please tell me, because I'm really confused.
Because their certification is done by the state.
So is everybody that is certified. When you get to license, you are certified. Does that mean that you're all now part of the government? You can say that I'm certified to allow the privilege to drive. That's not the same thing as saying I'm a certified doctor. What's the
I
That I
think
difference?
can
the
put ND on my
What's the
car.
difference? What's the difference?
The difference is who is it that's running these certifications and for how long? The
They're
reason
the
that
government.
you're
They're
seeing
the
this,
same
you allow
body.
you hold on, but it's not just that. That's not just one of the. Well, that's not the only way that the government is involved in doctors, and you know that as
Okay.
well as I do.
So
From prescription,
why are they a part of
from
the?
cost, from everything, they're involved in this. Now, but we're sidelining the issue here. It still
No,
comes
we're not.
down
I
to
want
the
to get.
same
I'm
thing.
hyper focusing on the issue. You're
No,
saying
no,
that
well, yeah,
doctors are a
but
part of
you're
the government. I want to know
understand
how
this.
and why.
I wanted people to understand why that there's a lack of trust there. You want us to trust others for a decision that's on an individual. I'm saying that we have to do that to an extent. I will agree with that, and it needs to be adjudicated.
So
Okay,
how do we adjudicate it? Is it just by your
that's a good
decision?
question. But the question but a question before that comes to this: how do you know a person is suicidal? How do you know that they're an assessment and a danger? There's always a problem with this because when you allow this to take place on a broad scale, okay, which is what you're saying with guns, okay,
and
it
I
gets
guess
abused.
And I guess the question also is it the government's responsibility to say to the suicidal person, oh, we know what's best for you, Mr. Suicidal person, so we are going to start restricting what you can or cannot do in your own, strictly your own personal life in this area and that area, etc.
Okay, so just so I understand this, please correct me if I'm wrong. I'm trying to be as genuine and honest as I possibly can. You're both saying that when knowing that over 20 something thousand people that commit suicide, that if you had a regulation that had something to do with this that could reduce 50% as a conservative effort, 50% of that could be reduced downwards. You could save 10,000 people's lives. You don't think that that's worth doing because of government overreach?
I don't think that the government should be involved in that.
But the government is involved in
Um,
everything.
Exactly the
it's
point.
yeah, I mean, but
Involved
we're
in
not
what?
exactly justifying that.
But you said that the government that does the certification for doctors is different to the government that certifies you for driving. It's not. So how do you square that circle for me?
Right, because it has nothing to do with ownership. It has to do with a privilege for driving on the roads. There's also
You do understand that when you're a doctor, it's a privilege to practice, right? That's the reason for the certification.
whether or not it's a privilege to practice or not. All right. The fact is that you get to put things on there that you don't that are actual privileges, not the ability to drive a car.
What do you think driving a car is? Do you not think that that's a privilege?
No, I don't. Well, do I believe that it's a privilege? No, but the government says that it is because it isn't specified. It isn't a right that was given to us by the Constitution either. That says that the government can't control that.
Agreed. But it's the case of that we have to make sure that the cars are responsible for the people that drive them, because otherwise we have accidents. Do we not agree with that?
We're going to have accidents anyway, aren't we?
Of course, but if you have people that are not trained to drive, do you think that you would have more people in accidents or less people in accidents?
I think that in the case of driving, quite frankly, all right, you would probably have a mixed bag. I think people that want to drive learn to drive, and when you first start off driving, before you get a license, you're no worse than the guy who just picks up the car for the first time. You are just as much of a danger. Have you seen student drivers? You're going to tell me they're not dangerous on the road?
And hence why we're talking about people that are training to drive to get their license. Do we think that people that get their license...
Those people are a danger already when they're on the road. When they're training, they're on the road. They don't
Yes,
all
but
of a
they're
sudden
normally...
get better.
But normally when we are training them, we normally have somebody that is with them that is taking responsibility for their training, do we not?
I do agree with you that's what's happening, but I disagree with the fact that it's from an overall perspective that it's made any difference on the roads.
You do not think that people that are trained to drive have less chance of committing a accident, for instance, than somebody that's not trained to drive?
No, I don't think that. I think that at the time period when they were being trained versus the people that are not trained, to sit up there and talk about, because there's a period at the beginning when you're first learning to drive, whether you're trained or not trained, right? There's really no difference.
But I'm not talking about that point. I'm talking about when you are trained.
But that's the point. If you took away the whole idea of training them, they would still start learning to drive. When they first begin learning to drive, they're still going to be as much of a threat as when they're training to learn to drive.
But when they are trained, they are not.
It doesn't matter, because once they're not,
that's the
even
point
if they're
I'm
not
making.
trained, if they have experience driving, they're no longer a threat. They're no longer going to sit up there and be any more of a danger, right?
I agree. That was my point.
So it comes down to experience. It has nothing to do, all right, with whether or not you have a little certification or not, all right, as to whether or not you should be allowed to go on the roads.
Do you think that little certification is not trying to suggest that you've had training to get to that point? If you've met training regulations to be able to pass that point.
In the United States, those things are not used to really hand out certifications about training or anything else. They're used as a method of taxation. It's a method of...
You're telling me that everybody that has ever gone to a DMV to get a license to after they've trained and they've done a driving test has all passed. There's nobody that's not passed their driving test.
No, I'm not saying that there are people that don't pass the driver's test.
Then they have to meet a requirement to pass.
What I'm saying is that the people that go in to take the driving test, all right, are the same way as a person who sits up there and goes in there that doesn't have a driver's test or doesn't have
to meet requirements.
They're meeting requirements, all right, a set of requirements that, quite frankly, are so loose as to be immaterial.
Okay, so what do you think should happen? Let's talk about cars, for instance. What do you think should happen there? Do you think there should be no regulation, no training?
I don't think there should be a regulation for driving, no.
Okay. Do you think that there should be any sort of health and safety laws or training when you're on a job, or?
No. Well, okay, it depends on the job, all right? Some jobs are inherently dangerous.
I'm confused by you, my friend. I'm very confused.
All right. For example, when you said there be any regulations when it comes to driving, I do believe that safety checks on a vehicle to make sure the vehicle is safe to be on the road, that is acceptable to me. All right. I'm not talking about emission standards and all the rest of that stuff. I'm talking about whether or not is that vehicle, like the brakes in working order and things like that. Checks like that are perfectly understandable. All right. But as far as a driver's test goes, right, while it all sounds good, I don't think it would make a bit of difference whether you went through the quote unquote certification process or not from on the road standpoint, that the roads would be any more dangerous or any less dangerous, all right, by that certification or not. I don't think it's affected by that. And there's reasons I say that specifically because I live in Arizona and we have a lot of people without any U.S. certifications whatsoever on our roads.
And do you think that's a bad thing or a good thing?
Well, I think it's an irritating thing because I'm being forced to pay the taxes by certifying myself or getting certified, and they don't.
Okay, let me shift it up again. And by the way, chat, I'm not talking about the right to drive. As I've already stated before at the beginning of this, it's a privilege. I'm talking about the privileges. Because at the minute, we're talking about the idea of government registrations and government certifications. Because apparently we can't talk about that without going into suicide and things like that. So we need to do this one first.
I would have less of a problem, all right, with what you're saying as far as guns and mental health, right? If, okay, the person who was in charge of the mental health, all right, was required to petition, all right, the court in order to sit up there and say, okay, we need to incarcerate this individual. If you're not going to go to the point of incarcerating an individual, okay, then as far as I'm concerned, for you to say, well, this person's depressed, but he's not enough of a danger to actually incarcerate him because he's not enough of a threat to himself or to others within society, right? If that's the case, then making the assessment whether he has a gun or not is immaterial to me, right? You've already assessed that he's not a danger.
Say as much as you want. I'm so fucking confused at this point in time.
All right. First of all, I want to ask: are you getting any reverb? I had to put away my earbuds because they're getting low battery.
You're all good
okay.
At the moment.
Okay. As I'm listening to you without earbuds right now, don't want it to be too much of an inconvenience. Also, I want to point out something that LawyerBot said that might be able to speed forward this conversation, this part of the conversation a bit. It's a socially acceptable level, or no, that's not it. Actually, if you have private property and drive only on that property, you do not require a license, which I think is fair. Like, honestly, if all roads were privatized, if there were no public sector roads, well, then I would say absolutely no on the licenses myself. But since these roads are not just any individual roads, they are really our roads as a whole society, or at least in theory, that's how it's supposed to be anyways. So therefore, I see it being justified that we do require some amount of licensing or whatever as far as people driving on the public roads as they are. But ideally speaking, it just to add this bit of caveat to anybody who is more of the anarchist variety or whatever, yes, ideally speaking, privatized roads would be more of the ideal. And at that point, I would agree definitely that driver's licenses should not be a requirement by law or anything like that. But as it stands right now, the whole driver's license issue is kind of marginal to me, especially since these are, again, our roads, public sector roads, not any individual's private roads.
Okay, so we've talked about nukes. We've now talked about licensing and certification. To me, it just sounds like we hate the government.
I don't. Well, we do. Okay. In all honesty, I try to be as consistent with my libertarianism as possible, whilst also being measured and amicable to the society as we have it right now, or at least somewhat amicable to some of the things that are just a little bit more understandable, that aren't as egregious as, say, small business owner, you must pay certain wage that you may or may not be able to afford within your budget, or hey, you're not allowed to own that gun, so therefore we're going to take it away from you, or anything like that.
See, again, that's not what my point was at all. With just
I'm just clarifying you to you what you said about me not trusting the government, which I say, plainly that is true. But at the same time, it's also me trying to be as consistent with my libertarianism as possible, whilst also being amicable within a given discussion.
Okay, so should we trust any hierarchy, and if so, why?
I think a voluntary hierarchy is the most acceptable kind of hierarchy. Like if you want to take up a job in a retail store, for example, communists.
So you said that you wanted to have a what was it? A voluntary hierarchy, yeah?
Depends on what the hierarchy is there for.
No. I'm asking Darkon.
No. Let me. Nomad. He is asking me. In all fairness, yeah. I mean, that's the most acceptable type of hierarchy. However, I also want to add. Well, I don't want to even classify this as a hierarchy. I am a minarchist, so obviously there is some form of government that exists, but it only exists in as so much to protect the rights of the individual, that being like a court system to make sure that people get their due process in case they are suspected of committing a crime against another individual, etc., etc. But that's about it, which I think pretty much all of us can agree that is necessary within a society for everybody's rights to be preserved. The one thing that is a bit of a problem with that well, that's not what I was going to go with,
joking.
actually.
I was joking. Stop being so serious. I was joking.
But okay, my bad. I am bad with sarcasm, but nonetheless, the one snag to that, what I just mentioned there, is that it requires funding, which means, yes, taxation, which I am not too fond of as well. And I would like to see some experimentation with taxation systems. But even if I ended up paying 5% of my income, for example, as an ideal would be within what I can imagine within a minarchist society, I think that is very marginal and very acceptable for the trade-off of getting my due process and preservations of my rights within a crime investigation / court system.
Well, human beings are we have a duality to our nature, all right, and that's not going to change no matter what we're like. There's going to be people who are far more individualistic and other people who are going to be far more socially oriented. But all people, to some degree, whether or not you agree with it or not, are going to have various aspects of both within their makeup, because that is how we evolved. All right, we are not just individuals. We also will create social dynamics to live within our groups. Okay, so that part of our duality is always where we're at. The problem with no matter what governmental system that you have is you're always going to sit up there and waver between the two. All right, at sometimes individual rights are far more important than societal rights. At other times, if all society goes away, the individuals are absolutely destroyed. So in order for the individuals to be protected, you need to sit up there and have some kind of social governance over the top of it. Right. So when you start talking about things like hierarchy and things like that, well, look, to be honest, human beings have always had a hierarchy, and you're always going to have a hierarchy. Why? Because when you're born, you're not as capable as the people who bore you.
Not to mention, even if you get rid of the government entirely, there are still going to be, as there will naturally fall into place, thought leaders who can help direct how the masses should be.
Well, right. There's some people who are naturally more follower oriented. Other people are more leadership oriented. Then once again, there are some people who are neither. They just want to be left alone. They want to be completely individual.
By the way,
these all exist within the human society as a whole.
By the way, I just want to answer Straight Sith Male in the chat. Dark Conservatarian, there are many different facets to what people consider a libertarian, which I do recognize that Straight Sith Male, but that's a little bit of a different conversation for another time for me to have with another libertarian, which I know that Common Sense Guy does not really call himself a libertarian. He's more like a utilitarian of some sorts. And Nomad, I do not know exactly what your beliefs are, but I mean, what are you actually, Nomad?
I consider myself a traditional conservative.
Okay.
It's not what people think of conservatism today, but I'm traditionally conservative. I'm a limited government constitutionalist, if you really want to.
Okay, so you would prefer if people abstained from homosexuality, but you don't want to ban it, for example.
Well, I don't think it's up to the federal government to get involved in the decision one way or another. I think that's something that
okay, let's just move away from this.
Okay, let's
just move away from this.
That's fair. I was just curious. That was all. But the reason why
I mean, it's a
I just want to. Yeah, sure. I gotcha. Like I said, that's fair. But to sort of bring us as to how we got to here, we're on the issue of talking about whether or not we should restrict a suicidal person's gun rights, and then somehow we got into the issue of licensing on cars and so forth.
Yes, because we were talking about certification, and we didn't believe some person didn't believe in the certification of government
because my lack of trust in the medical institution as it exists currently.
Yeah, I mean, there's a little bit of a difference between certifying somebody on whether or not they're allowed to access a public road via driving a car, and certifying somebody on whether or not they have the authority to, deny a suicidal person, or who they deem to be a suicidal person, their gun rights. One of them has a whole lot more power than the other, in my opinion.
Sure, but the point wasn't about the power. It was about the government giving certification, which is why I said, because No Man's point was that, because the government certifies them, that means that they shouldn't be doing this because the government certifies them. So the counter to that is, well, governments certify other things. Why is this a problem?
Honestly, I think that should be the focus of the issue, actually, is whether or not we give persons certification, this pre-approved stamp from Uncle Sam that, hey, you are officially well, in this one facet of society anyways, an agent of us, and therefore you have the jurisdiction to deny what you deem to be a suicidal person their gun rights.
Yes, but you understand that I'm not trying to say that that person should never get the right to have a gun.
You just think it should be in the short term until they are no longer suicidal. Am I understanding you correctly?
Correct. It's a very, very easy piece of legislation.
Well, then I guess this is something that I wanted to say a while back, actually. I think the concern that me and Nomad has is the issue of government having some kind of overreach in this area. They start being rather reckless with what they define a person to be suicidal or not. Because,
No,
quite
there's
honestly,
strict criteria for it. There's strict criteria for it.
well, I don't know. I mean, there are a lot of people that are a little bit overly charitable with calling another person suicidal, or even calling themselves suicidal for that matter.
Yes, but we're not
So,
trying to say that
because
the
if,
people are doing that. We're saying doctors. We're not saying people. We're saying doctors.
well, doctors are people that, I mean, in the short term, if I was to give you some amount of credence here, common sense guy, in the short term, yes, the doctors are going to be these upstanding guardians of health and whatnot, I suppose. But in the long run, if you keep on giving them this power, if you let them keep this power, I mean, they are going to exploit it to an extent that is quite scary, honestly. Of
yeah,
hey,
but why do
you said
two think that?
you said like you said
Why do I think
sarcastically
that?
this
Because
one
they
time.
won't-
Wait.
because what happened?
Like, hey, you said sarcastically this one time, communists make me want to shoot myself. So therefore, I'm going to take that as a serious red flag that you do want to shoot yourself. So therefore, I'm going to take away your gun
That's
right.
not what's taken as a red flag issue. See, I see that
No,
Lloyd wants put in there
I'm
as
saying
well.
that is the. I am saying I am saying that is a possible slippery slope with the society that you're trying to set up right here.
Yes, but you understand that the slippery slope in itself is a fallacy, yes? So I know that
No,
you're
it's
saying that
not.
it could by itself it is. By itself it is. I'm not trying to
In
say that you
some
cannot
cases,
get to...
in some
let you
cases
guys
it
talk.
can be. In some cases it isn't. I will meet you halfway there, common sense guy. But yeah,
I understand what you meant. I wasn't trying to say that you used it as a fallacy. I was trying to point out that in of itself it is. Not in the way that you used it. I was trying to put out to the fact that just saying, well, this could happen because that can happen, can be. In general, doctors normally have strict conditions that they need to follow when diagnosing somebody. That is the whole purpose of having a prognosis, to then give you a diagnosis. So you do the prognosis first, to saying this is what I think it is. Let's test it and let's find out what it is, which is the diagnosis. And
the only way that I would agree with that is if you're using a standard that's understandable to everyone. If it's for example, if you have a clear cut, here's what it means to be suicidal, and you can't, and it's got to be very specific. For example, you tried to commit suicide. I'd accept that. If you had attempted suicide and said at that point that person is suicidal, but if you're trying to do a pre-diagnosis before any action, okay, then you're getting involved in future dynamics, all right, and you're no longer concerned about individual rights. You're saying that society has the right to try and predetermine how much of a threat the person is without any action that person has taken. And I disagree fundamentally with that viewpoint.
Right. So you're saying that for this, if we were to put this through, this law would be a case of somebody would already have to try to attempt to kill themselves with a gun and then still say that they're suicidal afterwards before this would even happen in your mind?
No, if they attempted suicide in any way, shape, or form.
Sorry?
If they had attempted suicide in any way, shape, or form, if they tried to drown themselves, if they tried to jump off a building, if they had tried in some other method to try and kill themselves, then I would agree with, okay, yeah, that person's suicidal. But up to the point where you're saying trust another individual to assess this person. All right, for example, Are you going to say a guy is suicidal? All right, if he's in so much pain, he just wants to sit up there and have physician-assisted suicide. It is suicidal. He does want to.
By definition, he's suicidal. Just by definition, he's suicidal.
But is he? But if a person is going to the point of saying, "Okay, I want a physician-assisted suicide," a threat to the rest of society?
But no, that's the reason for euthanasia. You asked if he would be defined as suicidal, not if he's a danger to somebody else. But I'm not even saying. But I'm not even saying that he's going to be a danger to somebody else. I'm saying he's going to be a danger to himself.
Okay. So let's say he's a risk taker. You're going to sit up there to find that?
So do you think somebody who's an adrenaline junkie is the same as somebody who's suicidal?
I think no, but once you start down that case of saying, okay, this is the dangerous activity, this leads to a possible danger for this individual, where do you stop?
Dude, I'm literally saying, if you're saying that you're suicidal and we can clinically diagnose it, which we can, that you would want to take your life. This is not the same as saying, I'm going to go across and climb that mountain because I think it'd be cool.
Let's be honest here. Like, it's not that gun control advocates want to just stop at people who are suicidal as far as restricting a person's gun rights based off of their mental health.
I'm sorry, what? So
I just want to say, right now, I just want to say that right now the gun control crowd is not just some of them anyways. I don't know of what percentage it might be or not, but the gun control crowd is not just restricting their belief on who should be restricted from, owning a gun based off of their mental health to suicide. They want to extend it to other mental health as well.
Just repeat that last bit for me again.
They're wanting to extend gun rights infringement on mentally ill people, on not just suicidal people.
Sure, they are, but I'm talking about a particular law for suicide, which I think is a compromise.
Well, my thing is that you want to set up this apparatus to where that the doctors can deny people gun rights based off of their suicidal mentality. And I'm just thinking to myself, what if the bureaucratic or administration or whatever extends it to something beyond suicide?
Well, that's the reason why we would write it down as suicidal.
And I know that this might come off as a bit of a slippery slope fallacy to you, common sense guy, but the thing is, in reality, there are people that want to do that, is the thing. Do what I just said, I mean.
I'm sorry, people like Straight Sif Mel that are saying, no, common sense guy, there's just some people that chase the dragon and just want to die. I understand that there are people that claim that they are suicidal that are not actually suicidal. I'm talking about clinical suicidal. Not people going, oh, yeah, I don't feel very well today. I might kill myself.
But
I'm not talking about that.
Who gets to define somebody when they say they're just depressed? Maybe
we literally have criteria. We literally have criteria. We
have criteria that are so loose. Anybody can sit up there and say that this applies. This is why you have people being defined with clinical depression and being prescribed drugs. That when people come back later on, like 5 years later, going, yeah, I probably didn't need any of that, or no, we didn't really need to do that. If this was
I just want to say very quickly to the chat, to Shar Addy, you are all pissing me off. Get back on topic. The thing is, we are on topic, Shar Addy. This issue of mental health is directly correlated with the issue of gun control. People want to restrict people's gun rights based off of mental health.
Yep. I'm completely with you. I think that this is definitely an aspect that is, especially for what you said before, it's an in for the left. But this isn't a case of me trying to get an in. I'm generally trying to point out that there is a little bit of legislation that we could put into place that has the potential to save over 10,000 people's lives a day. A year. Sorry, my mistake. A year.
You say it has the potential, but you have no evidence that it actually will do it, do you?
If you cannot get a gun to kill yourself, can you kill yourself with a gun?
Let me ask you a question. If we take away texting on a cell phone, all right, we can reduce so many distracted drivers accidents. But reality,
what did you say?
Right. Well, if we sit up there and put in a law that says you can't sit up there and text on your cell phone, all right, because of accidents, all right, we can save so many people from texting and driving, all right, that would get into accidents, right?
You understand that we have laws like that?
Yeah, I also understand that when we put those laws here in the United States, specifically in my state, the rate of accidents didn't go down.
Ours did, and we have
Ours
scientific
didn't.
studies that prove it.
All right, ours didn't. Now the rates of people.
I'm actually going to Google that, so I hope you're right.
People,
I'm actually going to Google that.
The rates of the people who got into accidents because of quote unquote the distracted driving.
Oh, caveat. Okay.
Versus the total number of accidents being reduced, there was no difference.
Yes, there was.
Not in the U.S., not in the state of Arizona.
Okay, so you want me to specifically Google Arizona?
Yes,
okay, let's have a look.
Google the accident rates in the state of Arizona. Just because something sounds like it could save something or stop something doesn't mean it actually will do it. For one thing, you're making an assumption that a person who sits up there and has their quote unquote guns taken away from them, that they themselves would not find another way to get a gun or try some other method of suicide, all right, to kill themselves. And that those other methods, which statistically show fewer people dying from, would not all of a sudden rise in a higher death rate. Did you find it?
Yeah, but there's no law that's changed it in Arizona. It's talking about what's leading to the distracted drivers in Arizona. It doesn't say that there is a law that's changed in there since the law's changed or anything.
Hey, common sense guy. To read from the chat again, LawyerBot says CSG is under the impression that red flag laws do not infringe because of the temporary nature. Am I correct in that assumption?
No, because he's assuming that I want to interact with actual red laws. I'm not trying to put in red flag laws. I'm trying to point out the fact that we can have a aspect of where a doctor does an assessment, and then goes to a psychiatrist to do an assessment, and then can go to a court to be assessed to see if it goes against their constitutional rights, and they can argue it. And if at that point they argue it, they're no longer suicidal, are they?
But the issue of determining whether somebody is suicidal or not, therefore should be restricted from having a gun, is the issue of a red flag.
Not in the issue of actual red flag laws by the definition of red flag laws.
Well, red flag laws do not extend to mental health issues.
They do, but it extends to mental health issues where it's going to hurt other people, not to suicide.
That does not make any sense as far as the definition of red flag laws. I thought that, as far as I'm concerned, I thought that red flag laws were a whole lot more encompassing and were not just specifically fixated exclusively on whatever XYZ thing that you're trying to say. Like there are, even if it doesn't like say fit in the legal definition, colloquial speaking, it still is a red flag issue. Oh, you did this attempt on your own life, so therefore, what else are we going to call it except for a red flag that you might be suicidal?
Right. So from Wikipedia, because it was the easiest things that I could find, red flag law. In the United States, a red flag law is a gun control law that permits police or family members to petition a state court to order the temporary removal of firearms from a person who may present a danger to others or themselves. A judge makes
themselves. That's the key word right there.
Yeah, I paused specifically to make sure that I emphasized or of themselves. I'm not trying to hide anything.
Okay.
A judge makes the determination to issue the order based on statements and actions made by the gun owner in question. Refusal to comply with the order is punishable as a criminal offense. So even in this,
I guess I don't get the nitpickiness as to of LawyerBot calling it a red flag law. These, measures against suicidal people to have guns.
because this is not talking about specifically about mental health.
Well, it's still the issue of posing a danger on themselves.
Yes, but to others or themselves.
Yeah, or themselves. That's suicide.
Do you think that if I'm pissed off with somebody and I want to go and shoot somebody and I see all the cops roll up and I'm going to go, right, I'm going to get suicide to cops, do you think that that's me being a danger to myself because I want cops to shoot me?
Well, potentially yes, both yourself and the people around you.
Sure.
It's
So
both. Honestly, it's both.
Agree.
Common sense, guy.
I agree. No, I agree. It is definitely both. I agree with you. It's definitely both. But my point is that it's a case of it needs to be addressed by a judge. So if we're talking about the idea of even if this was a red flag law, which if you want me to, I can concede, but I'm adding an extra jurisprudence to this. I'm saying that there should be a doctor's note as well as a psychiatrist's note, and then you go against the judge. If you want to push it that far.
You know what? I'm not going to go talking about the the semantics of what we call a red flag law or not, but let me ask you this, common sense guy, more pertaining to what Lawyer Bot's the substance of his actual point was. Do you think that if a person is restricted from having guns because they were unhealthy to the point of being suicidal at one point, do you think that it will only be temporary and that the doctor will not say in the future after they're no longer suicidal, no, you're still suicidal, you're not allowed to have a gun?
I'm sorry, repeat that last question. Sorry.
You don't think that doctors will extend the gun prohibition on the formerly suicidal person any longer than the moment that they're actually suicidal?
Why would they? They're doctors.
I mean, and not all doctors are pro. Not all doctors are pro gun.
So, but are they not under an oath to make sure that they do things properly?
I mean, sure, in theory, but do we really trust them all enough to give them that extra amount of power? Like I'm just going to say that I am of the generality that the cops are more trustworthy, or excuse me, did I say cops? I meant doctors. That doctors are at least more trustworthy than cops or lawyers or politicians or anything along those lines. But I still am not enough trustworthy of doctors to say that we should give them all this power that we are debating over.
Right. So another thing that Lawyerbot put in is that the Cagalina versus Storm actually deals with this aspect. It doesn't. It's not a red flag law. That it actually goes to talk about the alleged that the defendants had violated the Second Amendment and Fourth Amendment rights, and that had violated the state laws, the firearms, ammunition, the police returned the guns. Actually, let me just go back to actually reading it rather than just stating off what a summary is.
All right, what you're talking about, though, actually, Derpy made a good point here. What you're talking about is a removal of rights. You're talking about what does it take to remove somebody's rights.
No, I'm not. I'm talking about suspension. We do that for felons already.
Suspension is a removal. Whether it's temporary or not, it is a removal of rights.
What's the definition of suspension?
Temporary removal of rights.
There we go.
It doesn't matter if it's temporary, especially when you use the term temporary and you can't define a time period with it.
Yes, I literally just did. I said when the doctors actually say that you're no longer suicidal.
Okay, so it's up to the doctor to then
wait. Hey, guys, stop talking over each other. Stop talking over each other, guys.
Or you can say that you're no longer suicidal and get a second opinion. You don't have to have the same doctor to give you the same opinion, the same as you don't have to have the same doctor to give you an assessment.
That sounds like it would likely become a bit of a legal mess.
No, because if one doctor says that you are and another doctor says that you aren't, and we're talking about the fact that you're saying that you are suicidal or not, if you're getting a second opinion, you're then stating you're no longer suicidal because you're fighting against the opinion of the first one, are you not?
Yeah. I'm just. You're saying that it is not going to get into a legal court case. I'm just thinking of the possibility or even likelihood that it would with somebody or even a lot of people.
Of course it would. This is America. There's
I'm sorry.
lawyers everywhere.
Repeat.
I mean,
repeat that.
we disputed over Kyle Rittenhouse and whether or not that his case was self-defense when it clearly was self-defense. I mean, what's to say that? And of course, there are other suicide self-defense cases that were clearly self-defense, yet they were ruled by a judge to be homicide or whatever. What's to say that there would not be a legal fight over the issue of whether or not somebody who was suicidal but no longer suicidal, whether or not they should get their gun rights back? I just don't find it worth it is the thing.
What do you mean? You don't find it worth it to save people
I don't
that are suicidal to do something that would save their life?
I
You
don't
don't find that worth it?
find the risk. I don't find the risk against their liberties to be worth it.
What do you mean
Whatever
the
in the
risk of liberties?
What?
What do you mean by
Their
risk
rights.
of liberties?
You're taking away their
The
liberty
risk of their rights of the the issue of the infringement, or what's the actual word I should use here? The prohibition on their gun rights being extended longer than their suicidal condition.
What do you mean longer than their suicidal position?
I'm talking about okay. Apparently we gotta slow down here or something. Or we're talking about when that you say in theory that a doctor should anyways say that the person is no longer suicidal. That's what I'm meaning by the prohibition on their gun rights lasting longer than their suicidal condition.
Yeah, but I'm also saying that the person can also determine if they're suicidal or not. So when somebody is talking to somebody who's being suicidal, they can either be referred or they can go themselves to be referred. So if you then say, well, I no longer feel that I'm suicidal, it doesn't matter again then, does it? Because you're no longer suicidal.
Lawyer bot is exactly right. It might be temporary, but like 6 years could be temporary, but still an infringement on the rights.
Sure, but the lawyer bot should actually read what I sent him because he's a little bit wrong on his assessment of that case.
the reality is comes down to a matter of governmental trust, and the one thing that from the United States, from our founding, that's ingrained is a lack thereof of governmental trust.
Sorry, repeat that because I'm trying to half concentrate on the chat because they're asking me questions and two other people, and it's kind of hard.
The United States, the Second Amendment was put in place, all right, because of a lack of governmental trust. You're telling us to trust the government, right? When it really comes down to what it really comes down to. When you talk about the Second Amendment, the Second Amendment was specified, all right, as a negative right. All right. Why? Because as an individual, you have the right to make these decisions. It should not be left up to anybody but the individual. When you add other groups or other entities into that, it no longer is a negative right anymore. And that's what you're foisting with this. When you sit up there and say somebody has the right to take away your guns without due process.
When did I say without due process, Nomad? Because I said that they need to go to court.
Hold on. Because you don't give due process the other way. Here's the rub with it. All right. You once the rights are taken away, all right, how do you get those rights back? It's now up to the state to hand those rights back. This is true of all rights that are taken away by due process, by the way.
So you think that due process is a way of taking somebody's rights away? So if you are accused of murder and you go on court, and then you are released by due process, you think you've lost some rights there, do you?
No, due process is when they've taken away that you're convicted of murder. And yes, you lose rights in America when you are convicted of murder.
That's not what I said. You said via due process, you lose rights.
Right. Now, the person who loses rights, a murderer loses rights. Let's say you go to jail for
I'm
murder.
talking about due process. I'm talking about
Well,
the
hold on.
fact of
I'm
going
gonna
through due
explain this
process
to
and
you.
getting free.
Right. No, hold on a second. But this is the same thing.
No, it's not the same thing.
The due process takes away the right. Okay.
It can do. It doesn't always. Which is the point I was making, but you don't want to address that.
If you're
point.
if you are if the process that we put in place takes away your rights, how do you get those rights back?
Sorry, repeat that.
How do you reassess to get those individual rights back? If due process has taken them away, how do you get them back?
What do you mean by that?
For example, let's say you went to jail for 20 years for murder.
Sure.
All right, can you vote after you get out?
No, because you're a felon.
Okay.
Well, depending.
How can you get your rights back?
Well, that's the whole point of being a felon, is it not? Or are you saying that felons should be able to do this and should be that? Didn't realize that you were a Bernie supporter.
I'm saying that they have to do something. They got to go through another process to get those rights back.
I got a question for Common Sense Guy. Are you saying that once a person has committed a felony, once in their life they should never get the right back to a gun, for example?
No, I actually believe in rehabilitation.
Okay. Because I thought that was what you were going to with this point with Nomad, but never mind. I guess I'm wrong.
Who gets to
No,
decide?
I just wanted to throw in a contradiction to him. That's all.
All right. Who gets to decide that? Right. When you sit up there to say that another person gets
society
to decide,
does.
Okay, so in other words, you need another process to it, right?
That's the whole process of society. That's the reason why we have
society is a dual process, has another process to get those rights back. But that's what the point is. In this case, however, you're not going through a criminal proceeding. You've never been proven to be a threat to society. All you're going by is a person's opinion, whether it's their professional opinion or not. You're going by their opinion that you're a threat to society.
But I'm not talking about being a threat to society. I'm talking specifically about suicide.
Even if you're talking about a suicide, where you're saying that this person's a threat to themselves, it's someone else's opinion.
Welcome to psychology?
It's an opinion.
It's a very educated
opinion. In my professional belief, this is what they're saying. There's no way you can clinically go out there and let a robot sit up there and assess whether or not somebody is a threat to themselves.
Well, you could actually if you programmed the right parameters in.
And there would be no guarantee that if you didn't do that, that the person would actually try to commit suicide, is there?
No, there's no guarantee that the person will commit suicide.
Then you don't really know if the person's a threat to themselves.
That's the reason why we say that. That's the reason why we say that they're suicidal, not that they are definitely going to kill themselves.
No, but you so they're a threat to themselves if they're suicidal. So you've already added another layer in. Okay.
Sorry.
When you sit up there and talk about a threat to somebody else, saying that they're suicidal, and in these conditions, there are time periods where these people are more likely, or have an increased likelihood, I should say, an increased likelihood of committing suicide. But there's no guarantee that they will, right?
There's no guarantee in anything.
You're making an assessment on them by saying, okay, these are conditions that we know increases the likelihood. It doesn't guarantee.
No, Matt, there's no guarantee in anything.
Okay. Then there's no guarantee
in anything.
Then there's no guarantee that the doctor is going to make an accurate assessment. Then there's no guarantee that the doctor...
There is a certainty. There is an educated certainty of that. I can be as certain as possible. That doesn't mean that it's a guarantee, though.
Right. Well, okay. And at what level?
You can be very highly educated and have a very...
No. What level of threat? What level of threat? What level of certainty do you have to be? All right.
You're asking me to quantify human emotion.
Do you think the person is 50% likely to commit suicide?
You're asking me to quantify human emotion.
No, I'm asking you to quantify directly when a person is suicidal or not.
Yes, you're asking me to quantify people's emotions. You're asking me to quantify it.
Yeah. Because that's what you're using to assess, in your opinion, when they should remove their rights.
I'm not saying it's quantifiable. You can have a reasonably estimated hypothesis on it.
All right, reasonably
technicality, Common Sense Guy.
Name one thing that's a guarantee. Then you're telling me there's guarantees. Name one thing that's a guarantee.
The sun will rise tomorrow.
No, because the sun can blow up tomorrow by having a black hole that comes up next to it. There is no guarantee in anything.
Okay, well, we'll see who's right. Right
Well,
tomorrow.
actually,
We'll know.
no. Sorry. There is one guarantee, and that's all that we will die of a heat death at some point. So there is one guarantee. I'll give you that.
Hey, I want to say one more thing before, and then have a little bit of a chance of dialogue on what I am about to say here with Common Sense Guy before I leave off of here, because I do have to go pretty soon. It's been like a little over 2 hours, and my dinner is going to be ready here soon enough. But
Yeah, I'm only going for
in
another
about
half
an hour or
anyway.
something like that. But Common Sense Guy, I just want to say that maybe statistically speaking, in this system that you want to set up in regards of suicidal people not being allowed to possess their guns, that statistically
frame it
speaking, they'll
properly?
be what?
Can you frame it properly? I'm not saying that they cannot be allowed to. I'm saying that it's
That they
suspended.
cannot be allowed to while they're suicidal. The next thing that I was about to say before you interrupted me right there
my
was
mistake, my mistake,
maybe it'll be perfect statistically speaking, in that it'll prevent suicides and at the same time give those formerly suicidal people back their gun rights after they're no longer suicidal. I mean, and I would have to like actually look at the statistical argument against that if I ever want to argue on the statistics against that. But I just do want to. And the reason why I say that is because I don't want to be accused of goalpost moving when I go saying this next point right here. But ultimately, in the ultimatum of things, I do believe that a suicide is a person's own right, even though in the private sector, we should do all we can to try and prevent them from committing suicide, give them encouraging notes like, hey, you're the best. Hey, we love you, dude. You know, that kind
Why
of
is the
stuff.
private sector different to government sector?
I'm talking about us doing things of our own volition, and
So
that
what do you
does
think
not
government
actually
is?
that it does not actually us in the private sector saying, hey, you're a good person, hey, don't commit suicide. That's not infringing on their rights. But the government coming in like with a doctor saying, hey, you cannot have your gun rights while you're suicidal, that is infringing on their rights.
Can I ask you a question very quickly?
But the reason, one second, I
It's
want to
really
finish
important. It's really
okay,
important.
never mind. Ask your question, then I'll finish my thought.
The reason why is because if you're saying that it's an infringement of rights, if you were going to kill yourself or I was going to kill myself, and I physically stopped you from doing it, or you physically stopped me from doing it, is that you or me infringing on your rights to commit suicide?
You know what? That is a fair question. If somebody like physically impedes, like hey, I'm about to pull the trigger right here, right now, and then you're in the immediate room with me, and you could like get the gun point aimed away from my head the very second before I actually squeeze the trigger. That does get into a little bit more murky territory. And I guess in all practicality, we could say, yeah, it's kind of an infringement on their own rights. But at the same time, I cannot really fault the person for trying to pull the gun away from, that person aiming it at their own head.
Okay, so was that a good thing or a bad thing?
In the practicality of things, of what physically just happened, it's a good thing because the person is no longer dead. And it's also
why is it
good.
Different?
What?
So why is it different?
It's different primarily in that there is not a government system enforcing this kind of standard on a mass scale and being doctors saying, hey, you cannot have your gun right now.
But it's okay for a person to stop you from committing suicide, but it's not okay for the government to stop you.
I'm not going to say plainly that it is okay for them to do it. But if they do it, well, then, hey, cool beans. If they don't do it because they're all like, hey, I really, really, really don't want you to do this. But if you end up doing it while, like, I'm looking away or something, then I realize that that is not my responsibility. Going to make me real sad and whatnot. How the dialogue tree will actually go, whatnot. But yeah, I guess I'll leave it at that.
I'll answer your question when you directly with it. Yes, exactly. CSG, the question you asked. Right? It's okay. It's all right for private person or an individual to do something, but not all right for the government to do something. Yes, that's true.
Why?
Why? All right, because the government, all right, can't be sit up there, can't be trusted.
I just want to say,
No, and then I'm saying you laugh, but the government
do,
can't be
because that's your
trusted
answer
to
for everything.
stay. The one thing that you keep laughing about is you think that the government, right, when it's given something, stays in its lane. It never historically does.
hey, Nomad, I was kind of wanting to finish up my part with Common Sense Guy before I get off of here. I want to just say that the individual physically stopping somebody from committing suicide on themselves, that is a little bit more of a mixed territory in mixing libertarian ethics with the actual real life practicality of, that person to just save that other person's life from themselves. But the thing is, with the government, they have massively more power than what the individual does, trying to pull the gun away from the person's own head, And so therefore they can do more mass scale harm in us, like legislating this, that, and the other thing. And really, yes, it's because of the fact that I believe that suicide is a person's own right, and that I don't think it is necessary to be setting up this apparatus in the first place. But from purely a utilitarian, pragmatic standpoint, as you are approaching, like I said earlier before I espouse my libertarian ethic principle right there, maybe there's a possibility that statistically it will pan out. Once a suicidal person is done being suicidal, they'll get their gun rights, and you'll statistically lower suicides that way. But according to libertarian ethics, I just don't see the government being just in doing that.
Sure, but you're putting a lot of aspects of saying that I wouldn't put regulation in if we were going to talk about this properly, about that if you're no longer suicidal, an escape clause, for instance.
Sorry, come again?
So when I put forward this proposal, nobody asked me how I would determine this. Both of you just went off at me, where I was saying that we need a doctor for the person to be able to go to. So we need a doctor for the person to go to, then the doctor to refer that person at the person's request to the psychiatrist. This isn't somebody just going off of the street, yeah, that guy's suicidal. No, I want the person to come to the doctor. I want the person to be referred.
No, I did not. I did not think that was how you were wanting it to work out. Is that just some random stranger?
We were talking about my aspect of law and what I would want to do. That's why I gave it as a hypothetical.
Okay, maybe I did say something a whole lot earlier that came off as you advocating that, hey, some stranger can just go all like, hey, that person is suicidal, and then boom, they have their gun rights taken away, even if it's just in the short term. But that's not what I was trying to say that you advocate for, because I'm pretty sure that you do not actually advocate for that. And as far as like jumping on you, like, I'm not trying to be, I mean, no offense, Nomad, but I know that Nomad has got kind of worked up at multiple points in this live stream, but I'm not trying to be angry or anything like at you for anything that you've said, CS Guy.
I'm not angry at him.
No, it's just the way you know.
Well, you're not technically angry. Nobody's calling each other a scumbag or anything like that. But
no, I have no problem. He's a freaking leftist hippie freaking commie as far as I'm concerned.
I fit it anyway.
Oh, Common Sense Guy, you get the helicopter now.
Hey, Pinochet was a fascist. He was right wing, not left.
No, that's the joke. That's the joke, though.
I know.
No, I was just saying you get the helicopter, as in you get the helicopter ride.
Oh no! I'm part of the fascists, so I'm going to be dropping your asses all out of the fucking helicopter, saying it's for government. It's government pleasure.
Oh, I gotcha. But I think that's how I'm going to end it off on my end, at least. But hey, Common Sense Guy, I really appreciate you bringing me on. This has been fun, even though if there are some points where I was thinking, I wish we can move on from this. I wish, et cetera, et cetera. Might have been a few points that were annoying, but overall, I had a blast. And yes, I did give the stream a like. Everybody give the stream a like. I do think that as much as disagreeable that common sense guy is, I do believe that he is a good faith actor with his beliefs. And Nomad, you're a cool guy too, honestly.
Thank you.
Anyway, everybody have a good night, everybody in the live chat. And hello, Derpy Redneck in the live chat. I'm glad that you could tune in from my Discord server onto here. And yeah, y'all have a good one and see you later.
Cheers, Darkon. Thank you, mate. So, just me and you now, Nomad. We can get right down to the meat and potatoes.
Okay.
To be fair, only for about another 30 minutes and then I'm coming off myself.
Yeah, I think it's going to be the whole thing. No, your trust in other people. All right.
You do realize, before you say anything, you do realize it's not a trust in other people. It's a trust in institutions that I can test, monitor, and follow. It's not the people that are within them that I trust.
But the individuals, all right, the institutions that you're talking about are flawed because there's people in them.
Everything's flawed.
Okay, and so the question there is then, okay, at what point do you sit up there and relax, your attentiveness?
Who said about relaxing though? You're assuming.
Well, you have to some degree.
No, right? I don't. No, I don't. I don't have to assume that I'm going to relax the attentiveness of monitoring the laws.
All right, but society will.
No, because there will always be people like you that mistrust the laws. That will be the ones that will be observing
right.
to make sure that they're there.
We're not the ones who carry the day all the time, are we?
But you don't need to be, especially in your country. No, even in your country, you don't need to be. If you find something and you can prove it, it will go into the news section and then will be pushed out massively.
Not necessarily. For example, if you really want to understand what I'm talking about, take a look at what happened in Athens, Georgia. Or not in Athens, Georgia, but Athens, Tennessee, excuse me. All right? Back after World War II. All right? You had everybody, including the press, all right, that were not trying to rectify a horrific situation. People had to take action specifically on an individual basis in order to fix things. With guns, by the way. All right? It took guns.
Sure. Can I just quickly address something that Shirati said, and then you can carry on?
Sure.
So Shirati said, is everything is flawed, then assume the test will be too. No, because we can talk about the methodology of testing, and then we can test it ourselves. We don't have to assume the tests are correct or wrong. We can do the tests. We can test it.
Do you have the capability of assessing whether or not a test a doctor has created is right or wrong?
Yes, you can read the actual abstraction. You can read the actual notations. You can actually go through it and measure it yourself. If you choose if you wanted to.
You have the ability to do that. All right. Does everybody have the ability to do that?
If they wanted to and understood the subject, yes.
Really? Somebody with Down syndrome has the ability to do that?
So now we're getting into specifics. Remember how we didn't want to do this beforehand?
But when you start talking about individuals and you're talking about individuals, all right?
It's of course when we're talking about hang on. We're not talking about individuals. We're talking about society.
No, but we're talking about how society and individuals, individual rights.
Yes, and individuals.
When it comes right down to it, you're talking about the relationship.
And individuals
between the individual and society.
And individuals that are within society are like you that will not trust what is going on, and that's a good thing. That can test it.
And what happens if we're not allowed to contest it?
What do you mean if you're not allowed to contest it or test it? What do you mean by that? Because we're just saying that's what we're talking about.
Suppose you're getting canceled for it.
What do you mean getting cancelled for it?
I mean, not allowed, deplatformed.
Like yes, but what are you talking about? Because if you're talking about stuff to do...
I'm talking about it generically.
So if you're talking about things that people disagree with and you can prove that with actual science, nobody will cancel you. If you're saying that I know this quack...
science and then you talk about psychology, there's no such thing as
dude, I really suggest...
Medicine, in fact, when you talk about medicine, yes, you can say certain things about medicine, but to be honest, people will tell you it's medical arts, not necessarily medical science. And there's a reason for that, because nobody is a cookie cutter. Nobody's body is a cookie cutter. There is no 100%.
The psychology says that you are a cookie cutter. Do you think psychology says that things are cookie cutters?
No,
Or do
I
you
don't
think
think
that they say that this is
I
a generality?
I don't think it's a cut that they say that you're a cookie cutter. That's not what I'm saying. But when you start talking
Mhm.
about a process that you're saying has specifics to it, then you have to create some kind of methodology that is a cookie cutter.
No, it's not a cookie cutter. It's you fit
Well,
into
all right,
certain.
and when you take away that cookie cutter, then okay, if you take that
I just
away,
said it
then you're
wasn't.
talking about a
I
difference
just said it
between one
wasn't.
person and another.
I just said it wasn't. It's not. Psychology isn't cookie cutter. It's never been designed to be cookie cutter ever. Even in Freud's time with his crap, it was never designed to be cookie cutter.
No, I agree with you. All right, but the thing
But you
is
just
that
said that it is.
but when you're applying it in this case, with this specific narrow instance where you're applying it, it has to be cookie cutter because you're saying it
What
has to have
narrow
these sets of
instance?
definitions. But then if you're saying that they have to be broad enough to be interpreted, then it becomes one person's opinion over another's, and relying
No, it
upon
doesn't. You
a
can have.
person's opinion is not the way to do this.
No, it doesn't boil down to one person's opinion. Even in psychology, you have to meet a burden of scientific study. So if you're saying that somebody is clinically suicidal, it has to meet a clinical definition or manage to a certain point of clinical definition, and then has to be tested.
What does it take to sit up there and change a clinical definition?
What do you mean to change the clinical
No,
definition?
let's
Because
say
it's
you have
backed
a
up by
clinical
loads of
definition for
different
suicidal.
citations.
What does it take for somebody to sit up and say that term is now, we're going to update that term and create a different term for it?
But probably about 1,000 different citations to prove that
Re-
the original was wrong.
Really? Is that what they did with vaccines?
Oh my! Don't go down vaccines, mate, because you're wrong.
Oh, no. Did
Don't.
they or did they not change the definition of vaccines?
What, to add the point of MRA,
No. To say that an
MNRA?
mRNA is a vaccine. Did they recreate create a definition of terms to sit up there and say it no longer has to sit up there and prevent disease? That now it's just a matter of lessening symptoms.
But you do realize that that is the point of curing a disease or actually getting a vaccine. You know, you get flu vaccines and boosters, right?
I know all about the flu vaccine and what it's intended to do. All right, and the problem with the flu vaccine is the same problem with all, which is they are using last year's estimation of what this year's vaccine is going to be, so they're planning it, all right, for that vaccine. But we're talking about a clinical definition. My problem is that when you say that it takes a lot to change a clinical definition, no, it doesn't. Okay, it doesn't necessarily. It just takes a quote unquote a group of people in authority, and they may not even be doctors, to sit up there and say, okay, this is what the definition actually means. And when you're applying that to the government, all right, which is what most people rely on.
What changed?
What do you mean? What changed?
How did the definition change to you?
It no longer has to be. It no longer has to prevent the disease to prevent infection.
So they added to the definition. They didn't change it.
No, they changed the definition. The definition before was that it would help prevent the infection. Now it doesn't have to prevent the infection. They
because
changed
the
the
vaccines
definition.
don't do that.
Huh? What?
Because vaccines don't always do that.
No, all that
That's
vaccines
why.
prior to this, all vaccines prevented infection, prevented higher rates of infection, not curative necessarily.
Yes, they added to that.
No, they didn't add to that. The thing is that they said that before it prevented infection. Now all of a sudden it doesn't. It no longer has to prevent infection. Now it reduces severe symptoms.
So it doesn't say prevent infection and or.
No, but even if you add an or, the moment you add an or, okay, you've changed the definition.
I never said that it didn't change. I said they added to it.
They rewrote it. You effectively rewrote the definition
added
from one thing where it meant prevention of infection. Now it no longer has to prevent infection.
But no, it does. It actually even says that.
What? That it
It
prevents
says a
infection?
substance used to stimulate the production of antibodies and provide immunity against one or several diseases prepared from the causation agent of a disease. Its
That's not
products
the way
or
it reads now.
synthetic. Sorry?
It says and, all right. So all right. So are you going to tell me that the mRNA, all right, does prevent infection?
Yes, it does prevent. It's not a complete prevention.
No,
It
I'm
does
not asking
prevent.
for. I'm not one of these people who says that these things have to be complete. That's not the point, all right? You're saying that it prevents infection. Can you show me the data that shows that the actual data, human data, that shows that the rate of infection is less?
Yes, there's loads of studies that prove that.
There's loads of studies that do not prove that. In fact, the whole thing about what's going on right now in Israel, where this is. But I don't want to get locked into this. Okay.
No. Do you understand when they're talking about the Israel study? The Israel study was to point out that the time that it takes for the immunity has now decreased.
This is one of the
They're
newer
not saying
studies
that
just came out. This is not the same thing. This is one of the newer studies where they were talking about with the boosters and everything.
Yes, that's the
Right.
one I was talking about. Because they did it so early, the time's changing on it, which is why they're having boosters to boost the immunity. The
This is
vaccine
after the
still
boosters.
works.
The boosters are still showing people with rates of infection. The rates of infection have not reduced.
Can you link me to that study that says that in Israel that they haven't?
I'll look for it and I'll send it to you. But I
Yeah,
don't want
I'm
to get
sure.
locked into this.
Okay.
My point is still the same, right? Which is to change the definition of terms from a medical thing, right? It's not it doesn't take necessarily a whole body of study or a whole group of people to change it. All it takes is one. Now, sometimes these things are done in a group, sometimes they're done in a body, and other times it's just done by osmosis where most people start to agree on a local term, so therefore it becomes a term, right? But from a legal perspective, all it takes is for legally some kind of legal action to say this is how we are now treating this term. All right, that's all it takes. It just takes a group of people to say this is now going to be the definition. In the United States, they did that with the CDC. The CDC basically can change whatever the CDC and the FDA can change whatever they are using as a metric, all right, without any kind of import or any kind of input, all right, from somebody outside their group to sit up there and say this. Now,
so are words prescribed or described, Nomad?
what do you mean? Are words described or prescribed?
Are they prescribed words or are they described?
No. Sometimes it's a description, all right. And then what does the description mean? They're both.
They're never, but words are never prescribed. They're always descriptions.
No, the definitions are always defined.
No.
Always a definition.
Words by definition are always descriptions. It's a descriptive language. When we use language, it's a describing
And
adjective.
somebody and sometimes when the language changes, all right, that can change very simply by people, everyone agreeing to a group or another person, all right, sitting up there making something that intentionally goes into the consciousness. But when you start talking about from a legal perspective, all right, and you're trying to codify this in a legal standard, all right, all it takes is a legal codification to determine what that is. You don't even need a doctor, for example, to define, okay, what's a heartbeat?
You don't need just one doctor to redefine it. It has to be agreed before a consensus before it's changed.
Wrong.
The same as in a consensus of the CDC, right? So if the CDC, I'll let you finish. Don't worry, you carry on.
No, well, you're not listening to what I'm saying. When I'm talking about it from a legal definition of terms in this regard, okay, all it takes is for lawyers, all right, or the legislature to make that change. You don't even have to go to a doctor.
No, because what you're talking about is the definition on a medical level, not legal.
Okay. But we're not
medically.
But when you're talking about entering the judiciary,
let me finish.
They need a legal definition.
Nomad,
right?
let me finish. Let me finish, buddy. So when you're talking about the definition changing from the CDC, the CDC decided that they were going to come forward to change it because the definition didn't match its previous definition, because people come together as a consensus in the medical field to say that's not what vaccines mean anymore.
So they changed the vaccines for what purpose? To suit themselves, right?
To add to the definition. Because it wasn't
to suit themselves.
Do you want me to bring it back up again? No, man. Do you want me to bring the definition back up to you? I showed you what the definition was.
You can bring the definition back up, but once again, they changed it, all right, to suit themselves.
It
Right?
wasn't to
They did
suit
not change
themselves.
this because they had medical
No, no.
consensus around the
Yes, they
world
did.
to change
Yes,
this.
they did. Yes, they did.
Really? They put out
Yes.
flyers to doctors?
Do
That
you
said,
know
hey,
how
we're thinking
conventional?
about changing the definition. That was worldwide. Everybody knew that they were going to that they were considering changing the definition. It was well known within the medical community, right? That's what
In
you're
the
asserting.
CDC and other governing bodies around the CDC, yes. Which is why the CDC changed
the other
it.
governmental bodies around the CDC.
No, the other medical bodies.
What other medical bodies are there? The AMA. The AMA wasn't told.
Were they not?
No, not until it came out.
Really?
Yeah, they
Really?
don't have to be.
Did they condemn the change, though, MC? Did they
They didn't
condemn
condemn
it?
it. No, they didn't. They
Oh,
did
so
not
they
condemn it.
accepted it then, did they? They
Whether
accepted
they
the change.
accepted it or not is not the point. To say
Is
that
it
there
not?
was
I
some
thought that was
that
the
there
whole
was
point
some
of
built upon
consensus.
consensus. All right.
Mm-hmm. Which is what I just said. That it's accepted by the consensus, so it's a changed definition.
No, okay, but that comes down to why did they agree to it? Is it because they're authoritarians
Because
themselves?
government bad, MC. Because government bad.
Well, you trust the government.
I don't trust the government. I don't trust the government. I trust what I can test.
Yeah. Well, okay. We'll go back to this again, right? We're talking about what's the definition here. The definition here is defined. Hold on. The definition when you take it to court has to be defined. Whether the medical community agrees with it or not, all right. The
legal
court
definition.
system will define it. For example, the heartbeat law, right? They had to go in there and specifically go in and say what is a heartbeat when they're talking about the Texas abortion law. They had to specifically state that because legally, all right, what's a heartbeat? Yeah, it sounds like it's common sense. But at the same time, when you start talking about around the edges of when the hearts actually start to take place,
Do you want to know what the legal definition for vaccine is? Do you want to know what the legal definition for vaccine is?
Sure. What's now the legal definition of vaccine?
The legal definition for vaccine is the vaccine. The term vaccine means the substance designed to be administered to a human being for the prevention of one or more diseases.
Right.
That's the legal definition in your country.
For the prevention of disease. That means that you got to prevent catching the disease.
Yes, it does prevent, just not as much as you want it to.
Your assessment that it prevents and my assessment of it presents
60 to 80% prevention. You cannot dispute that it's 60 to 80%
I'm still waiting
prevention.
to see. Hold on, I'm still waiting to see human trials showing that.
Then you need to Google them.
No, they're not human trials. They're estimatings from models. That's the ones that I've seen so far.
That used human trials. We have tons in Europe.
Mm-hmm. Okay, well, tell me how you're using that when Pfizer has yet to release that data.
Sorry?
Pfizer has yet to release that data to the public.
What do you mean Pfizer's refused to release that data? Or
that data that you're talking about was submitted in the United States. I don't know about anywhere else, but in the United States, the data that the CDC references, all right, it begins initially with the initial studies done by Pfizer, but Pfizer has not released the documentation saying that, all right, saying what it is to create.
So how did the CDC get it?
That they utilized.
So how did the CDC
It's been turned over to the FDA and it's been turned over to the CDC, but we've actually had to sue to try and get that data. And what's more is the government is saying, okay, you can have this 50,000 or this 500,000 page documents that we have on this, but we're going to give it out to you 500 pages a month.
So we have trials from Oxford.
Okay.
So we have trials from Oxford.
And the number of people in those trials is what?
Your original claim was nobody did it.
No, I'm saying I didn't say that. I said we don't see that we don't have the human data. So since you have the human data, you should be able to tell me how many people were in the study, how many people got infected versus how many people didn't get infected.
Well, good thing is, what I can do is I can send it into the chat and you can read it for yourself.
Okay.
There you go. Everybody can read it.
But regardless of this, I don't want to. We're off topic, and I don't want to stay off topic on this. Okay. This is just a slight example of why I don't trust government. Right. And this is not.
So I'm guessing that you wouldn't trust. I'm guessing you wouldn't trust the NHS then if I sent that to you as a study that they've done themselves.
I mean, it's a study. It's worthwhile reading. I take it for what it's worth.
Well, it's not a study itself. It's showing you the research. I'll be clear. It's showing you the research and links to it.
Mm-hmm. Right.
You can even sign up for it as well if you want to.
No, I will look at it. But let's back to the case. You're talking about psychology and coming back with a standard, but the standard is, well, what's generally accepted by the medical professionals at that time.
So when did you actually go out? When did you say that Pfizer didn't produce their results? Would you say is it this year
Pfizer
or
is,
last
when I
year?
say
Or?
Pfizer, I said Pfizer hasn't released the results to the public.
Okay, well that was in 2020.
Well, no, okay, I shouldn't say the results. They have not released the data to justify the results. They haven't released all their study data.
Okay, well it links that.
It links what? It links the results, the study results. It does not release all the documentation in the study because, like I said, it's 500,000 pages worth of documents.
Sure.
You don't believe me?
No, I not read it. I've seen it.
Okay, you've seen the 500,000 pages.
No, I've seen that they've had that. But I've also seen the breakdown of people that have read the whole thing, that have put it into an abstract.
Right. No, you've seen some people. Other people that have quote unquote read the whole thing, all right? I've listened to them. They say that this is not what it says. And they point out where the discrepancies are. So you act like that there's some huge consensus here. And I'm not saying I'm not even saying that the vaccine. What you don't understand is you think that I'm saying the vaccines don't work. Okay, and I haven't said that.
I'm not saying that at all. I'm not thinking that. I'm not saying that at all. I'm saying that your distrust from the government is healthy in small moderation, but you just trust everything that they've ever done and ever do.
I do. That's a default. It starts from that default point. That's true.
So when I show you that there have been studies, when I've showed you that there have been studies to prove this, that there is human trials that have occurred.
I realize that there are human trials that, quote unquote, have occurred. But if you take a look at those human trials that have occurred, all right, in this case that we're talking about here, okay, they are not, it is a very narrow, and there are a lot of caveats to them to start with, in case you haven't noticed.
Can you show me one study that says that?
Well, sure. I just take a look at any one of the studies with ivermectin when they're talking about this stuff. And all you have to do, the first thing you'll find is that.
Stop.
Hold on.
I don't want to shout.
You said you wanted to see a study that's very narrow.
No, I didn't. I did
then
not.
What are you asking me?
I'm asking for you to prove what you're saying about the vaccines with a single study that backs up what you say. Not going, ivermectin with this.
Vaccines?
We are talking about the vaccine.
What have I said about the vaccines?
You said that they didn't commit any human trials, and I proved that they did.
I didn't say that. I said that they had not released any of the data on any of the trials. Not that they didn't supposedly do.
I've just linked to 3 different.
They did not release. Sure, but those papers, if you look at them, give you the overall result that they conclude. Here's our conclusions with these results. Okay.
Do you not think that there's been independent people that have also looked at the studies?
I know of independent people who have looked at those studies and say, well, what about this, and this, and haven't gotten the answers. This is why I say release the data.
Most of the data has been released.
It has not. The results of the data have been released. The actual data of the studies has not been. It's the same problem that you have with global climate change when people said, hey,
now we're going on to
global climate change. No, with the University of what was it, Anglica, where they made a lot of claims, and people started saying, okay, well, show us the data that you're using, the original data that came to this conclusion, and they came back and said, oh, I'm sorry, we destroyed it all.
Sure.
That didn't happen.
Does that mean that you think that we didn't go to the moon either?
No, that doesn't mean that.
But they destroyed all the data, MC.
All right, it doesn't mean that we whether or not we went to the moon. I don't think the Brits have been to the moon aside from the little flag.
I never meant we. I never meant we as in the
Frickin'
Brits.
British.
I meant America. I meant everybody on Earth.
Put a freaking British flag on the moon at the same time. Well, actually, it went technically before ours because it was on the pole, but that's a separate issue. You didn't know that, though, did you?
No, I didn't, because I don't really care that much. Because I know we went to the moon. I don't really care about that much.
Yeah, there was actually a NASA scientist who was British, and he actually imprinted the British flag on the flagpole. All right, that was flying on the moon. And technically, since the flagpole was there before the flag got put on the flagpole, the British flag was flying on the moon first. Technically.
I mean, whatever.
It's one of those neat little things about history. But I'm not even then. You're talking about taking away a person's rights with guns, all right, or an individual right, all right, and you are which there's one part of this that I do agree with you on, right? As much contrarian as I've been, I will admit certain things. There is a due process, and there's a due process involved in this, okay, that explains this. Then technically, all right, you're not violating the person's rights from a constitutional perspective. Okay, the problem that I have with the situation as it currently exists in our country today is I cannot trust the medical groups, any of them, okay, to not play politics with this issue because it's too political already. I can't trust them, all right, because, and I'll tell you why I say that, because they involve themselves in politics, all right, and once these groups like the AMA involved itself into politics, okay, I can no longer trust any of them. Now, if they stayed away from politics, if they sit up there and said, look, we're not going to ban people for their political speech, or we're not going to put out documents that say, don't talk about this, that would have been fine.
So what did the AMA actually do?
The AMA actually came out and sit up there and supported, all right, different politicians for election.
So they're like every other single group that has ever lived.
Then they put out. I understand. Not every corporation comes out and says, "I'm for candidate X, Y, Z." Not every grocery.
But they put their money there, though, don't they?
Huh?
They put their money there, though, don't they? You know, donors and all that sort of stuff.
If a group puts money anywhere, then it's a problem. If individuals within that group put money somewhere, I don't care.
But corporations are individuals, remember?
Yeah, and corporations. Look,
that's why I said it.
I'm not wrong. I'm not on the same side. I'm on the same side with you when it calling a corporation a person. That's ridiculous. Okay,
I'm with you.
All right.
I'm with you.
All right. I understand the law from perspective of why they tried to say it, right? But it was stupid. Right? It was a bad decision. Right? It was a bad Supreme Court decision. Right? I agree with you. Okay. Once again, it's another decision. The Supreme Court has made a lot of decisions that I disagree with fundamentally. All right. When they allowed the lawsuit, and I think I've told you this before, when they allowed the lawsuit, all right, which was a 9-0 decision, by the way, to go forward against Bill Clinton, I was like, what the hell are you doing? This was he was the president of the United States, sitting president of the United States. There's no reason why you couldn't have waited for a civil lawsuit, all right, to go forward. There's no reason that it had to go forward at that time, regardless of how guilty or not.
Wait. Why should they wait? You know, that infringes the rights, doesn't it?
Because the office of the presidency can be interfered with.
No, the president can, not the office.
No, the office, to say that you can divorce the presidency from the office of the president is kind of silly, to be honest.
No, it's not, MC. It's a case of if somebody does something wrong as president, they should still be done at that point in time while they're still being a leader.
No. You could, okay, but in order to do that,
that's the point.
In order for that to happen, all right, it doesn't take place in the legal process. It has to take place in the political process first.
I'm going to have to get going now anyway.
All right. Just to explain so people understand, right? in order for you to quote unquote charge, there are many people who say this. In order for you to bring charges against the sitting president of the United States, right? By some constitutional scholars, they will tell you you have to impeach him first.
All right. Okay.
All right, because you have to and in order to do that, you have to remove him, all right, from that office, because everything else can be interfering with the performance of the executive branch. Because all the executive branch, when it really comes down to it, is tied to the single individual, the president of the United States.
Okay. So everybody keeps on asking me to look at the Israel one. So can somebody actually tell me what one? Are we talking about natural immunity
Yeah,
that nobody
there's a several that were put out. There's one. I'll find it for you and I'll send it to you.
So one stating that natural immunity is better than anything that you can get for some kind of vaccine. Yes. What do you think a vaccine does? It increases your natural immunity. So of course, if you have natural immunity to it, you're going to have better immunity to it. It's the fact that not everybody has natural immunity to it. Nobody disputed that you can't have natural immunity better than a vaccine. It's the fact that not everybody has natural immunity greater than a
There
vaccine.
were some assessments that people had initially stated that natural immunity is less effective than the vaccine. There was people that were saying it at the time.
Then they're idiots. The reason why vaccines happen is to boost your natural immunity.
What they were referencing when they're talking natural immunity in the United States, they're talking about having caught the disease and gotten over it.
Sorry, what were they doing?
They weren't talking about a person's personal immunity currently. They're talking about having caught the disease and gotten over it.
Yeah, that increases their natural immunity.
Right, but that's what they're when they say natural immunity, that's what they're referring to. They're not talking about a person's natural their immunity prior to catching or not catching the disease. That makes sense.
Yeah, but nobody said that natural immunity is worse than getting the vaccine. It's stating
there were people initially here in the United States that did say that. There were politicians that said that.
Then, well, they're politicians. They're fucking idiots.
I don't disagree with you.
Yeah, but that's the thing. We don't actually disagree as much as people think that we do. We just have different.
And what's more is I don't help matters because of how I approach things and taking the devil's advocate with some of the stuff. Right?
Yeah, a little bit.
Because, like I said, when it comes to these things, I agree with you from a due process standpoint. The problem is I can't trust the medical community. All right now, to make those kinds of decisions, especially because you're making individual decisions on rights. They're not trustworthy to make those kinds of decisions. And there are plenty of, and another thing that's happened is there are a number of psychologists in the United States that have flat out said, since I don't think anybody should have guns because I'm a leftist, I would try to ban every one of them. They have actually come out and said that. So
I'm sure.
There is
the thing is with that though, mate, is that when you have a personal gripe, as it states, if you know somebody, you're not allowed to treat them. If you don't like the look of somebody, so for instance, you don't want to treat somebody you think is a white supremacist or whatever, you don't have to treat them. They have somebody else that can treat them.
You can't.
That doesn't care.
You can't do that in the United States. At least from an emergency perspective.
Yeah, no, admittedly, yes. I'm not talking about emergency perspective, though, are we? That's all I was meaning. I wasn't saying, oh yeah, an emergency perspective that, oh yeah, you get to pick and choose who you can fucking. No, it's a case of if you walk in and somebody's a white supremacist and starts calling you names, you don't have to treat that person afterwards.
All right, here's the first study. I'll put it in the private chat for you. It's a little easier. Yes, assuming that I did it right. All right, that's the study. This is the study about the antibodies that everyone was referencing. You're wondering why they were referencing it, but that's where one of them is. All right, let me see if I can find this other study. Okay, search. What was it? What else were we referring to?
I have no idea.
Well, one was this study. What was the other study? Not the natural immunity study. The other one.
Like I said, I have no idea.
We got off topic. All right. All right. I think it's this one. Where's the study? The link used to be here. Hold on. I got to find out where the damn study went.
No problem. It's actually between time.
But anyway, just you trust these people far more than I ever will.
I don't trust the people. I trust the studies.
I don't trust the institutions the way you do.
I don't. I trust the studies. So that's why I've asked the studies and why I'm reading the studies.
When I read the studies, you and I are reading from a different group, from a different experience on studies, I guess, because I don't interpret them the same way that everyone else does. I don't. All right, because when somebody makes a comment, I want specific numbers, and you don't get specific numbers the way they talk about them.
So the study that you just sent me is saying that people that caught COVID-19 ended up having a higher natural immunity than what they had done beforehand.
Right. Well,
so where did I disagree with you on that?
Than those that take the vaccine.
Yes, natural immunity, if you survive it, is always going to be stronger if you had the virus and developed your own immunity. So lasts longer.
But once again, like I said, there were people that were making the argument that wasn't true.
Yes, again, they're politicians and they're stupid. We do not disagree on this.
All right. Once again, yeah, but I wasn't making any other statement about it.
No, but other people in the chat were, and they were calling me dishonest.
No, I don't think you're being dishonest.
No, they were.
Have I called you dishonest yet? You freaking left-leaning freaking drugs, pot-smoking hippie, Marxist.
I mean, I do believe in the means of production.
It's a joke, folks. It's a joke.
Well, no, it's like I said, I do believe in the means of production, not who should have it.
Yeah. I can't find this. Where does this go? Where did the actual study go? That's not it. Where's
yeah, all that study says is something that I already would have agreed with anyway.
Yeah, well, which is where did the rest of this go? Hold on, I gotta find it. I know it's here. It's just a matter of figuring out where they put it. Let me go over to here and do this.
I think that we can just call it quits anyway.
Well, yeah, I mean, because we're afar off. The United States, though, the one thing about our society, right, is our society is created to distrust government.
Right? Yeah, and I don't disagree with distrusting government. So when I say that we should when I say that we should do these things, I'm not saying that what we should do is trust government. So I put in I wanted to, but I wasn't able to. I wanted to put in specific outliers and perfect steps for what I wanted to do. It wasn't a case of a doctor via themselves could just say that you're suicidal. I wanted the person that was feeling suicidal to go to a doctor, to then be referred by that doctor to a psychiatrist, for that psychiatrist to then do a test to see how they are suicidal, for it then to go in front of a judge to decide whether or not it meets a constitutional right of taking away their guns. I'll admit that. taking away their guns until they are no longer at a high level of suicidality. That's all I wanted. That's all I was trying to get to. But for some reason, that I wasn't ever able to get through that bit.
All right. The thing about that though is, and I hadn't brought up this point, but I was going to. I just got sidelined with a bunch of other things. Is sure that sounds good, all well and good, but expecting the individual. All right. If an individual knows that he's going to lose, he possibly could lose rights or have his guns taken away. That may inhibit him from going to seek medical opinion or a medical doctor.
So, do people that are clinically depressed or insane or anything go to check themselves into rehab, forcefully check themselves into rehab, and forcibly check themselves into psychological hospitals by themselves?
Do people do it? Or,
Yes,
or
loads of people.
is it normal for people to do that?
Yes, it's more normal for them to do it, to be self-admitted, than it is for the state to admit them.
It's very difficult for the state to admit them. Yes, that's very true. Okay, so people do go in right now, but then again, right now, red flag laws. There's not that many in the United States in comparison.
Again, we went through the red framing of this.
Well, I'm using it in the broad sense to include in this case. Okay, so I mean,
right. So a lot of people very quickly. A lot of people are misunderstanding why I'm putting a judge in there. So when somebody comes forward to say that they're suicidal and they go forward to ask for help, as in they do not want to kill themselves, but they're really tempted to, it's a case of they're going there to ask them to be able to take away their chances of committing suicide because they feel that they want to, but they know that they don't want to. So they're always conflicted. You have good days, you have bad days, so to speak, right? So when you have a case of going to the judge to decide whether or not for a period of time you take away the gun, it's a case of them being able to lose that way of having an easy way out of getting a gun and pulling the trigger. So it takes away that option for them to grab it. That's where people are going wrong with this. That, oh yeah, they could just release their chances of getting guns and not worry about it. The reason why I'm pointing this out is because, well, I can say to a doctor that I'm feeling suicidal, go home, ask for a gun check, wait 2 weeks, shoot myself. Where I'm saying that for that moment in time, why I'm being suicidal and seeking medical help, why I am seeking medical help, I can then see the government taking away that chance of me going, well, why I'm suicidal? They don't actually want a gun.
Well, sure.
Yeah, they may find another way.
But at that point, if they don't want a gun at that point where they're suicidal, then they themselves can just turn in the gun, right?
No, because why would you turn in your gun?
Well, because you have it. If you want it taken away from you, what's the difference? If you're saying come in and take it away from
I'm not saying that they want to take the gun away. I'm not saying that they should give their guns away. I'm saying for when people actually want to actually say that they don't want to ask for a gun to get a gun. Not if they already have a gun.
Okay.
And I don't know if Shirati was here at the beginning, but I went through the fatality.
So you want the government to be able to be placed on a governmental list, all right? That then, if they try to get a gun, they'll be denied legally purchasing a gun.
Why they are asking for that? Yes.
Yeah. Well, first of all, then who in the government is going to take them off that list?
No. It's not the government that needs to take them off of that list. All they need to do is go back to their psychiatrist.
Well, who's going to access that list? Somebody has to have access. The gun dealer, the guy who's going to sell the guns, right? Doesn't he need to access that list?
Of course, yes.
Okay. Well, so if he has access to that list, you can tell me the government doesn't have access to that list?
No, I didn't understand what you meant by access to that list.
Okay. Well, how is there a national database? Are there databases locally? How do you want this? How do you want this managed? And who's going to manage it?
What do you mean? Who's going to manage it?
Well, who's going to create this database?
So, what happens when you have a gun background check?
Right. They ask the FBI, does this person have a record that to prevent them from having a gun?
So why would that be so hard of adding this temporary basis
because
to that
now
background check?
you're giving that data over to the FBI and you're allowing the FBI to sit up there and make the decision.
At the person's request.
Well, once again, if the person then requests that it be taken off, the FBI may or may not listen to that person now. Can they?
But I'm sorry, what?
Who's gonna prevent the FBI or ensure that the FBI, when that person says, "Okay, I'm cured now, take me off this list," who's going to ensure that the FBI does it?
Would you what? What, taking them back off?
Yeah.
The judge.
So a judge later on, you got to then sue, all right, to
No.
have that happen. If it fails to happen,
No. The whole process is going to have a temporary column for it. So it's not a case of it will continuously be done. It's a case of because you've asked to be removed from the list, so to speak, it's only on a temporary basis.
right? But that
So
temporary
when you go,
basis has no automatic sunset law.
yes, it
Right.
does. Yes,
Well,
it does. You can have it from a point of it being if somebody doesn't get back in touch within 4 months, we can assume that they are no longer suicidal.
all right, and then the FBI. Well, suppose the FBI then says, "Well, we're not updating it every 4 months."
Then they
Or
are
we're
then
not updating.
infringing on the rights of that person and breaking the Second Amendment.
Okay, but in order for somebody to claim that the FBI is doing that, they've got to go through the process of the legal process to do that.
No, they don't.
And actually, yes, they do.
No, they
In the
don't.
United States, they do.
So if they've gone through a judge to ask for a temporary release of not being able to get their guns because they feel suicidal, and it's only a temporary release that they've asked for, this is not mandated. This is them asking for it. The chat's not, which is why I'm going over it again. So this is not a mandatory aspect. The reason why we ask for a judge is to make it official so that they can send it to the FBI so the FBI can then monitor it so you cannot get it in that time period. We can have a sunset clause law, for instance.
Mhm.
We can have a sunset clause law where it states that if you do not receive any notice from this person within a 2 to 3 month period, that we then say that they are no longer suicidal. We can also we can have that as an automatic. That has to be automatically confirmed, regardless.
But the FBI is supposed to automatically remove people before, and they failed to do it. So the question is can you trust the FBI then to sit up there and react that way? And my answer to that is obviously no.
Yeah, but then we would find out that the FBI are doing that wrong, what we have done beforehand,
We know that the FBI has been doing a lot of things wrong, haven't we?
Well, everything does things wrong, buddy.
All right. Have they been doing things wrong for political purposes only?
Right. So I'm not 100% sure what Loibot's saying here. The reason why, and by the way, it's not a temporary infringement if you're asking for that infringement to happen upon you. It's not circular logic. If I go to the government and saying, I feel suicidal, I would like to make sure that I cannot get hold of a gun. Can you make sure that I legally can't get a hold of a gun because of a background check? That's not circular reasoning. Just to let you know. There's no circularity there, buddy. None whatsoever.
I understand what you're trying to do, but he's right about saying, why does the FBI need to get involved in this?
Because
the
who does
reason
the background check?
came about because
who does the background check? Who does the background check? If the background check can be done by local sheriffs, then let them do it. But if it is done in your country by the FBI, then unfortunately it has to be done through the FBI.
Manufacturers send data to the federal government. The problem then becomes the federal government is getting involved. You have the FBI getting involved in, let's be frank here, all right, medical decisions. I don't want the FBI anywhere near the medicine. They're already having enough problems with what they're supposed to be doing.
They're not going to be anywhere near the medical decisions. They're not going to be anywhere near the medical decisions. The FBI are just there to, if you have a background check, that they do the background check. The decision comes from you talking to your psychiatrist and getting it ratified through a judge. That's it. And that's to be with a positive and a negative.
The FBI has been known to, once you give it a little bit of power, expand on that power. And you're saying, no, they won't do it this time. I'm sorry. I'm not
saying that they won't. I'm saying that via this law, by the legislation, they can't. They would have to add to it.
by the law, they're not supposed to be freaking invading people's privacy. By the law, they're not supposed to be doctoring documents or creating documents.
MC, stop talking about COVID. MC, stop talking about COVID, or I'm going to boot you. I'm fed. You are talking about doing the medical changes.
No. What I'm talking. What I'm specifically referencing in this case is Russia, the RussiaGate thing.
I really don't care. I really don't care.
Look, whatever the FBI is involved in, I'm not going to trust them. Come on, you know that's true.
Sure, but I'm not asking for the FBI to be implementing or deciding how long these things are happening for. I'm not asking for the FBI.
FBI has to be involved in telling the person, telling the guy who comes into them, is this person on a data on a register or not, right?
Simply, yes, but that's not to say that they are in control of how long they stay on the register for. Okay? Do we get that? Does everybody get that? The FBI will not be in control for how long that they are allowed to be on the register. Can everybody in chat get that?
Once
Please?
again, I agree, but they're saying that it's 50% of even if you say that it's 5 months, excuse me, not 50%. Even if you're saying that, let's say we'll use you an arbitrary number, 5 months, right?
Well, I would have said 2 to 3, but
2 to
fine.
3, 2 to 3, 5 months. Whatever you decide, whatever gets determined here from a standpoint, it's fine, all right.
Sure,
whatever we allow from a legal standpoint. The problem is that who is it that's going to sit up there and watch to make sure, who puts in place that, and how does it get put in place that this thing is automatically, after so many days, them taking off of this database? Because the database doesn't just have the database doesn't just, you got to remember, the
it's
database,
a computer database.
It is a computer database, but it's a database that also includes known terrorists or suspected terrorists, right?
You do understand that if you put into a database temporary time allowance for how long it stays on the database because it's done by Excel, you can actually do that.
You could do that, right? But are you going to mandate that the FBI run that database that way?
Sorry?
Are you going to go down to the weeds and saying, and the FBI will set up the database, and here's exactly how they'll set up the database?
No, I want the state legislature to be able to do that.
All right, but a state legislature can't sit up and dictate to the FBI.
But they can petition to the federal government to say this is the way that we want it done. Otherwise, we're not having that law.
I realize they can petition the federal government, but the federal government can say no.
But I'm not asking this to be a federalized law. So I'm asking for the state to do this because I'm not trying to say that I want this mandated in every state. This should be a state by state aspect as well.
All right. If you're having the state do it, then you're having to expand the background check from the gun manufacturer. He now has to look at state record. All right, in this part over here, and adding another thing on over here to say, okay, and you got to ask the FBI.
No, I'm asking the state to partition to have the FBI have that only as a temporary stuff. So everything that's being asked for has a chain of custody.
The state has no control over the FBI as to how the FBI actually manages this. Just
so
because
can I finish? So can I finish?
Sure.
So when I'm saying that the state is going to legislate this, I'm not saying that it's going to dictate to what the FBI are going to do. I'm saying that this is going through a chain of command, a chain of custody of you have the person going to the doctor, the doctor going to the psychiatrist going to the judge saying that it's okay for the state to do this, the state then going, it's okay for this to happen to the FBI. That means that you have 5 different ways of protecting to make sure that all these people know how long the timeline is compared to the FBI. So you have all of these legislators, at least 4 of them, that are able to make petitions to make sure that the FBI follow what they're supposed to follow.
Okay, but why do you think that their FBI, those petitions mean anything to the FBI? That's what I don't understand.
Sorry? Because I'm talking about gun background checks.
You're
telling me that the FBI needs to be doing that.
I'm saying that the FBI does that now. The people that because of federal legislation.
So that's why I'm mentioning.
All right, now
the FBI. Because how can you do a gun check without the FBI?
Okay, I understand that, but if you
right, I need to go. I need to go. I'm sorry.
All right, sorry about that, dude.
That's right, no worries. Right, thank you everyone for taking the time to actually enjoy this. It's been interesting. I've been getting frustrated simply because I think that a lot of people are missing what I'm saying. That may be a me problem. That may be a me problem, which is fine. But I always knew it was going to be adversarial because I'm a Brit bonger. I'm a limey. I'm talking about Second Amendment. People naturally think that I don't understand why the laws are in place. And I would like to think that I've been with Americans long enough to have a inkling, a small understanding of why they're there. And I understand the reasoning and the wanting of the protection of it. I just wanted to put out the fact that I'm not trying to take people's guns away. Though I know some people are going to say, "Oh, but you are." Even the example that you use is like, yeah. For somebody saying that they want their guns to be taken away with them for a separate point, isn't the government doing it? It's the government allowing them to do it. And I know some people go, "Oh, that's a distinction without merit." It's like, there's a big distinction. Me saying I want it to be taken away for a little bit than the government saying it. Why don't you ask me, Shirati, how I actually would support the Second Amendment and actually think that the Second Amendment is the second most important law and constitutional right that you've ever had? I understand how it's important, my darling. I really do. I'm just saying that there may be some sort of regulations that we can do for safety reasons to change it.
I don't
Not always, and we need to all.
Safety. That's the problem, and I think and even
Well,
if it does,
that's the reason why. No, Matt, that's the reason why I brought up the different statistics. It would, it does, and it will. But that's not what I'm trying to say. That's something that you guys could have a conversation about. The conversation wasn't trying to say that I'm right and you're wrong, or you're right and I'm wrong.
I'm not saying that. I'm saying
it's all the conversation was for tonight was trying to see if we can find a way of talking about any sort of gun control or any sort of gun ideas. And what we ended up doing was talking about nukes, talking about people with guns and knives, talking about the idea of corporations being people, and the idea of red flag laws. So we've done really well in talking about the Second Amendment. So we've done really well here, and it's just a fun old stream. So in essence, we did nothing, we achieved nothing, but we had fun. And that's all that matters, right?
This article references some stuff, but I can't find the document. I'm still looking for the document, just to let you know.
That's fine. I'm really not interested in COVID at all at the moment. So
I've worn him down. I've worn him out. He's like sick of listening to me. Haven't changed his mind. Haven't resolved anything.
Yeah, we've
he's just mad at me now. He's gonna ban me. I'm gonna be banned from CSG server.
Do I have a server? Oh, yeah, I still do. I forgot about that. Yeah, I still do.
I'm actually not on your server, to be honest.
You left. I never kicked anybody.
I don't think I was ever on it. That's why.
Oh, I tell a lie. I've kicked one person, but they deserved it.
Wasn't me. No, I honestly don't remember what your server was.
I don't think that you could do anything for me to kick you, because every time I want an American on, I normally pick you. So
is that because I'm unapologetically American?
I didn't know. I would say so. It's nice talking to somebody who's actually honest in their opinions, regardless of if we disagree or agree. It's nice being able to talk to somebody that's non-apologetic for their opinions and can own their positions rather than hiding from it. That some people might do.
I'm not going to hide my opinions on these things. The things that I wanted to see, right? And this comes from a difference, by the way. One of the reasons why I hammer on things.
You're like my dad. You're exactly like my dad. Every time I want to try and leave, another conversation starts.
Well, I apologize for that, but I work for a medical company, right? And I go through a lot of medical freaking papers all the time, right? Because of what most of what I do is radiation oncology specific, okay? But one of the things that it has caused me to do, right, prior to me actually, working for this company. Well, actually working for the previous company that they got bought out by this company. All right. Is it caused me to have a lot of this where I used to sit up there and be just like you. Doctors, for the most part, I believed in their views. I believed in, the doctors were not that they were perfect, but that generally they were good and for the most part, and that they wouldn't engage in certain things. Right.
Mm-hmm.
But Now I don't have that view anymore because I see what they've done in so many areas and how I'm overly, and this is very true. I am knee jerk sensitive, all right, to word parsing, right? If I see something that I think that is word parsed, all right, or that they're referencing something with specific words to avoid certain things, I immediately get a negative view of this, right? And there's lots of ways that they do that within the medical field. I mean, we had, for example, we had a company or a group of radiation oncologists that tried to claim that there was a 15% discrepancy in the amount of dose being delivered, right, with these specific machines, right? And it isn't unless you read and understand certain things that, yeah, there is a 15% discrepancy when you're not using the machine, okay, clinically. When you've taken the safety checks, all right, that are off of the machine, and you are having the machine do things that it tells you can't do clinically because the machine wasn't built that way. And in that narrow subset, the results weren't what they expected them to be. Well, of course not. You're not using it in a clinical mode. How then can you put out a medical paper saying that you're seeing a 15 percent dose discrepancy, all right, when you're not given clinical dose? What would you do the paper for? How
Sure.
rational is that? And what's worse about it is the devices that they chose to use for measuring the dose. That manufacturer says don't use it for anything smaller than like a 1 centimeter by 1 centimeter field, right? And they're looking at 1 millimeter by 1 millimeter fields.
So we're still talking about medical stuff. Can I
Well,
go?
I'm referencing why I don't trust the medical these papers and stuff, right? Because
Sure, I get that. Maybe you should do that on another stream so I can fuck off.
Well, you ended the stream, didn't you? No, apparently you didn't.
No, of course I
ended
didn't.
the stream. I thought you had stopped the stream.
No, I'm British. I'm polite to the end. God damn it!
I apologize, ladies and gentlemen. I thought I was talking to him to describe all this stuff for CNG specifically about this stuff, right? And why I don't do it. I didn't realize to bother people's ears or bend their ears about my complaints, my personal little complaints and so forth.
No, right. In that case, we're now leaving. Do you have anything to say before leaving?
Thanks for coming on, everybody. CSG is a good guy. No, he's not a freaking gun grabber. I don't consider him a gun grabber. I do consider him a lefty. All right, but once again, that's from my perspective here across the pond, right? Right, and our establishment and how our government is established and how it's referenced. So there's a lot of differences between the cultures, and that's one of the things that I mentioned this to you earlier, right, about how when you talk about the Western world, and you say that the United States is a Western country. Yeah, we are, but we're not like any other country either. Right now, all countries can claim that to a degree, but the United States is significantly different than Western Europe, in any country in Western Europe, and I don't think people understand that.
No, I will second that. There's a lot of people that look at Western Europe and think, oh yeah, America's exactly the same. I don't think that you could say New York's the same as California. So how can you say that America's the same as Europe? There's just no comparison.
Well, LA is not the same as Chicago. Is not the same as New York. It's not
okay. Let's go. Bye, everyone. Thank you very much. Cheers. See you all again. Hopefully at some point, if I can ever remember that I have a channel, because sometimes I forget. Bye, guys. Cheers.